What happens when everything you've built falls apart? Alex stood at the front door of the house he had once shared with Sarah, his wife. Now, it felt like a cold, unfamiliar place. The door, once an entrance to a home full of love and laughter, was now a silent witness to a past that had slipped away. His 5 kids, his world, stood beside him, each one with a different expression etched across their faces. There was Emily, 23 now, her arms crossed as she stared off into the distance. Lucas, 20, nervously fidgeting with his keys. Bella, 18, lost in her thoughts, looking like the little girl Sarah had abandoned. Max, 15, who was still carrying the weight of abandonment in his eyes. And Noah, 10, too young to remember what life had been like when his mother had left. And now, after 10 years, she was back. Dad, Emily's voice broke through his thoughts, soft but firm. Are we really doing this? Alex glanced at her. He could see the anger mixed with confusion in her eyes, the same confusion that mirrored his own when Sarah walked out on them. His breath hitched in his chest, his mind racing with memories of what it was like before, when things seemed perfect, when they were a family. A real family. Why is she here, Dad? Lucas asked, his voice tight, but his tone carrying a mix of curiosity and resentment. He hadn't been a teenager when Sarah left, he was just a child, lost in a world that didn't make sense anymore. He'd spent years trying to make sense of his mother's absence, trying to understand why she chose to leave them all behind. But he never got the answers. Alex didn't know what to say. He hadn't prepared for this. The 10 years of struggle, raising their children alone, trying to make up for the gaps Sarah had left in their lives, it all felt like a distant echo now, and yet, here she was, knocking on the door to the life they had rebuilt. The air was thick with tension as Alex opened the door fully, revealing Sarah standing on the porch, looking exactly the same, but somehow different. Older, sure, but there was something else about her. It was the way she stood, the way her hands trembled slightly at her sides. She wasn't the same confident woman who had walked out of this house all those years ago. "Hi," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I need to talk to you. All of you." Alex's heart pounded in his chest. Was she really standing there? Was this some kind of joke? How could she just show up after all these years, after abandoning them, after abandoning him? He had spent so much time holding on to the resentment, the hurt, and the anger, but seeing her now, standing in front of him like nothing had happened, it felt like a slap to the face. "I think we should sit down," Sarah added, her voice shaking. "I owe you all an explanation." Emily stepped forward, her face hardening as she spoke. "An explanation? You left us. You left Dad. And you think you can just walk back in like nothing happened?" Alex placed a hand gently on her shoulder. He knew how hard this was for her, how hard it was for all of them. But this wasn't the moment to let anger take over. They needed to hear what Sarah had to say, even if they didn't want to. "Let's listen to her," Alex said softly, but firmly, looking at his children. He wasn't sure if he believed the words that were about to come out of Sarah's mouth, but they had to hear it. They deserved to know why she left, and maybe, just maybe, they could start to heal from the wounds she had caused. Sarah stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room, her eyes lingering on the photographs, on the moments she had once been part of. A heavy silence filled the space. It felt like a lifetime ago, when they were all a family, when things were different. Back then, the house was filled with laughter, chaos, love. Now, there was just silence. "I'm sorry," Sarah started, her voice thick with emotion. "I know I can't take back what I did, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But I need you to understand that I didn't leave because I wanted to hurt you. I was lost. I didn't know how to be the person you needed me to be, or the mother you all deserved." Alex didn't know how to respond. The words Sarah spoke sounded familiar, but they also felt hollow, like she had rehearsed them over and over in her head. He could hear the pain in her voice, but could he really believe it after all these years? It wasn't easy for me either, Sarah continued, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I couldn't handle the pressure. I couldn't handle the responsibility. The kids, the house, the life we had built, everything was just too much. I felt like I was suffocating. The room was eerily quiet, as if everyone was waiting for Sarah's next words to change everything. For a moment, Alex could feel the weight of those years, the years of struggling alone, of making decisions he never wanted to make. He had raised their children, guided them through their hardest times, and loved them fiercely. But hearing Sarah's explanation now, it didn't seem to soften the edges of the pain that had shaped his life without her. I thought I was doing what was best for all of us, Sarah said, her voice faltering. But I was wrong. I left, and I didn't think about what it would do to you, to the kids, to us. I've regretted it every day since then. Regret. That word. Alex had heard it so many times, whispered into his ear in the middle of the night, when the loneliness felt unbearable. Regret. But it was too late for that now, wasn't it? She had already made her choice. She had already walked out. Dad, are you really listening to this? Emily asked, her voice breaking through the silence. She left us. She just left. And now, after 10 years, she wants to come back and pretend like nothing happened. Alex turned to look at his daughter. He saw the hurt in her eyes, the betrayal that still haunted her. He knew that this was bigger than just Sarah coming back. It was about everything they had lost, everything she had taken with her when she left. I'm sorry, Sarah repeated, her voice trembling. But I want to make things right. I know it's not going to be easy. I know I can't just pick up where we left off, but I want to try. Alex's heart pounded in his chest. Could he really allow this woman back into his life, back into the lives of their children? Could he ever trust her again? The silence in the room stretched on, thick and heavy. The past had a way of sticking to you, weighing you down, making it impossible to move forward. But maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for something more. A chance for healing. For forgiveness. For a new beginning. But was he ready for that? Was anyone? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Alex didn't want to look back. He hadn't allowed himself to for years. But standing here now, with Sarah's unexpected return pulling at the fabric of everything he had tried so hard to rebuild, he couldn't help it. The weight of the past pressed against him like a boulder he'd been carrying all these years. Before Sarah left, life had been different. Life had been simpler, filled with moments of laughter and a love that felt endless. Alex and Sarah had been young, full of dreams, and ready to take on the world. They had built a life together, piece by piece, not knowing that one day, it would all crumble. They met in their 20s, in college. Sarah was the free-spirited artist, always chasing new adventures, and Alex was the steady one, grounded, always there to pick up the pieces when things didn't go as planned. They complemented each other perfectly, or so they thought. She loved his calm demeanor, his easy smile, the way he made her feel safe in a world that was often unpredictable. He adored her sense of wonder, her passion for life, the way she could turn any mundane moment into something special. They got married when Sarah was 25, a whirlwind of love and excitement. Alex thought they had the perfect life ahead of them. They bought their first house in a quiet suburban neighborhood, surrounded by green lawns and families just like theirs. It felt like the dream everyone else was living, and Alex felt lucky. But then came the kids. Emily was born first, and she brought a sense of purpose to their lives. A year later, Lucas arrived, and Sarah's world shifted. 2 children, so close in age, but they weren't as easy as they had imagined. The sleepless nights, the endless feeding and diaper changes, the never-ending demands, they began to take a toll. Sarah, once full of energy and ideas, began to withdraw. She didn't have the same spark in her eyes, and Alex noticed. At first, it was subtle. She would spend hours lost in her art, in a world she had created for herself, while Alex took on more responsibility. "Are you okay?" he'd ask, gently rubbing her back as she sat at the kitchen table with a blank canvas in front of her. "I'm fine," she'd reply, but Alex could see the exhaustion in her face. She wasn't the same. They had more children, Bella, then Max, and finally Noah. The house grew louder with the sound of little feet, voices, and the chaos of a busy family. Alex was happy, but Sarah was slowly fading. As the kids grew, so did the strain. She felt overwhelmed, drowning in the responsibilities of motherhood, and Alex, always the provider, wasn't able to offer the kind of emotional support she needed. For years, he had tried to convince her that they could get through it together. He worked long hours, sometimes double shifts, to provide for the family, but it never seemed like enough. She would tell him she felt like she had lost herself, like she wasn't the woman he had married anymore. Alex wanted to fix it, wanted to reassure her that they would be okay. But he didn't know how to reach her. The more he tried, the more distant she became. The tipping point came one quiet evening when Alex came home to an empty house. The kids were at their grandparents', and Sarah was gone. Her things were gone too, clothes, art supplies, even her favorite books. There was a note, hastily written, on the kitchen counter. "Alex, I love you, but I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry. I need to find myself again. I hope you'll understand." And just like that, she was gone. No explanation, no warning, no fight. She just left. Alex stood in the doorway, staring at the empty space she had once filled. He had been angry at first, furious even. How could she leave him with 5 kids, with all the responsibility, all the weight of their world? But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, the anger gave way to something else, a deep, crushing sadness. He didn't know how to do it alone. The weight of parenting 5 children without Sarah's support felt unbearable. Emily was old enough to help, but she was also struggling with her own feelings of abandonment. Lucas was angry and confused, and the younger kids didn't understand why their mom was gone. But Alex didn't have time to wallow. There were 5 kids to take care of. Meals to cook. Homework to help with. Doctor's appointments to schedule. Birthdays to celebrate. And through it all, Alex learned how to be both mother and father to his children. It wasn't easy, but he did it. Every day, for 10 years, he did it. And in the process, something shifted in him. Alex had always been the kind of man who could compartmentalize his emotions, who could bottle up his feelings and keep them hidden. But with Sarah gone, he had no choice but to face everything, his pain, his fear, his love for his children, and find a way to keep going. He learned how to be more present for his kids, how to listen to them, how to comfort them when they cried for their mom. He learned how to be patient, how to balance work with the overwhelming demands of fatherhood. He learned how to love in ways he never thought possible. And though it was hard, Alex came to realize something important: he didn't need Sarah to be a good father. He didn't need her to be the person he had relied on for so long. But he never stopped loving her. Despite everything, there was always a part of him that missed her. That missed the woman she had been, the woman he had fallen in love with. It wasn't easy to admit, but it was true. He couldn't deny the hole she had left in his life. Now, standing here, looking at the woman who had walked away from everything they had built, Alex couldn't decide how he felt. He was angry, confused, and hurt. But he was also curious. Curious about why she had come back. Curious about whether this was an opportunity for healing or just another painful reminder of the past. "Dad, are you okay?" Emily's voice interrupted his thoughts. Alex looked at his daughter, her face filled with concern. He nodded, even though he didn't feel okay. "I don't know yet," he admitted softly. "But we'll figure this out, together." The words felt like a promise, but inside, Alex wasn't so sure. He wasn't sure if they could ever fix what had been broken. But one thing was certain, his life had changed forever the moment Sarah left, and now, with her return, everything was about to change again. It didn't take long for the reality of Sarah's return to settle in. The house that had once been filled with the sound of 5 children's laughter and Alex's constant efforts to create some semblance of normalcy was now caught in an uneasy silence. Even the kids, who had been so quick to express their anger at Sarah's sudden reappearance, didn't quite know how to handle her being back. For the first few days, Alex had tried to keep things civil. He wanted to believe that perhaps Sarah's return could bring healing, even if it didn't happen overnight. He didn't expect a miracle, but maybe there could be some peace, some understanding between them, maybe even a path to forgiveness. But the tension was palpable. Every glance Sarah threw at her children seemed to carry with it an unspoken apology, a deep sorrow for what she had left behind. But those silent words only seemed to deepen the emotional gulf between her and her kids. Emily, the eldest, had been the most vocal. It was clear that the years of resentment and betrayal had built up a thick wall between mother and daughter. "You think you can just come back into our lives after all this time?" Emily snapped one evening as they sat around the dinner table, a meal that felt more like an uncomfortable reunion than a family gathering. Alex had tried to intervene, but the words were already out. He saw Emily's face flushed with emotion, her anger, and pain bubbling over the years of resentment she had kept hidden. "I'm sorry, Emily," Sarah began softly, but Emily wasn't having it. "Sorry?" Emily laughed bitterly. "Sorry doesn't even begin to cover it, Mom. You walked away. You left us to deal with everything, everything. And now you want to come back like nothing happened." Sarah lowered her eyes, looking as if each word was a physical blow. "I never meant to hurt you. I never wanted to leave. I was just lost. But I know I can't undo what I did." "Yeah, you can't," Emily shot back, her voice thick with emotion. "You can't undo anything. We're not the same people anymore, and neither are you." Alex could feel his heart breaking for Emily. He knew how hard this was for her. She had been the one who tried to keep the family together, who filled in the gaps Sarah had left. Emily had been forced to grow up faster than any child should. She had been the second parent to the younger kids, and she had done it with grace, even if she didn't always show it. She had become the mother figure, while Alex tried to juggle both roles. "I'm trying, Emily. I'm here because I want to make things right," Sarah said, her voice breaking, tears gathering in her eyes. "I can't change the past, but I want to be here for you, for all of you. I want to be part of your lives again." Emily pushed her chair back from the table, standing up quickly. "No. No, you don't get to just show up after 10 years and say you want to be a part of our lives. You left us. We don't need you now. We've done just fine without you." "Emily, stop," Alex finally said, his voice firm, but laced with the exhaustion of trying to keep things calm. He had seen this kind of fight too many times. The kids' anger was valid, but it wasn't helping anything. They needed to talk, not shout. "We all need to calm down. This isn't helping anyone. Dad, how can you just forgive her?" Emily demanded, her voice shaking. "How can you just act like nothing happened?" "I'm not forgiving her," Alex replied quietly, his words carrying more weight than he intended. "But we can't keep living in the past, either." Sarah's eyes shifted to Alex, pleading for his support, for understanding. But how could he offer that when he wasn't sure himself? How could he expect their kids to forgive her when he was still so uncertain about what he wanted from this whole situation? The air grew thick with unspoken words, and Alex could feel the chasm between him and his children growing wider with each passing moment. This wasn't just about Sarah returning. It was about everything that had happened during those 10 years. The hurt, the loss, the feeling of being abandoned by someone they loved so deeply. Max, the quietest of the bunch, was the next to speak. He had been sitting at the end of the table, listening to everything unfold, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke, his voice small but filled with pain. "She's not the same anymore," Max said, his eyes distant. "None of us are. And I don't know if I can just forgive her." The words hit Alex hard. He had been so focused on keeping things together, on trying to rebuild a sense of normalcy for his children. But he hadn't realized just how deep the scars ran, especially for the younger ones who hadn't fully understood the reasons behind Sarah's departure. Max was right, none of them were the same. They had all changed over the years, and so had Sarah. "I know it's hard," Sarah said quietly, her voice trembling. "I know I can't just walk back into your lives and expect everything to be okay. But I'm here now. And I'm not going anywhere." But the words felt hollow, and the room fell into another painful silence. Lucas was the next to speak, his tone quieter than Emily's, but no less intense. "It's not just about what you did. It's about everything that came after. We had to survive without you, and now you think we should just welcome you back with open arms. It doesn't work that way." Alex felt his heart tighten in his chest. He knew his kids were right. He couldn't pretend that everything was fine. He couldn't pretend that Sarah's sudden return didn't stir up feelings of resentment in all of them. The time they had spent rebuilding, coping, and surviving without her had created a divide that would take more than a few apologies to heal. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness," Sarah said, her voice soft, her eyes searching each of their faces. "I'm just asking for a chance. A chance to prove that I can be here now, that I can be the mother you all deserve. It's going to take time, I know that. But I'm willing to try." Alex's mind raced. Could they really try again? Could they find a way to move forward after everything? The tension in the room was suffocating, and Alex could feel the weight of his children's eyes on him, waiting for his next move. The stakes were high. If they didn't handle this right, it could tear them apart even further. "Dad?" Emily's voice broke through his thoughts. "What are we supposed to do?" Alex looked at Sarah, then at his children, all of their faces filled with hope, doubt, anger, and fear. He knew this wasn't going to be easy. But one thing was clear, whatever happened next, they were all going to have to face it together. "I don't know yet," Alex said finally, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "But we're going to figure this out. We have to." But deep down, Alex knew this was just the beginning of something much bigger. Something that would force them all to confront the past and decide if there was even a chance for a future. The next few days were filled with tension, as Sarah's presence in the house remained a constant reminder of everything they had been through. The kids continued to keep their distance from her, their expressions a mixture of confusion, anger, and deep hurt. The wounds were still fresh, and for all of Sarah's apologies, it was clear that no amount of words could heal the rift between them. Alex, on the other hand, found himself standing at a crossroads. He had spent years rebuilding his life and raising their children alone, and while part of him longed for the past they had shared, another part was afraid of what reuniting might mean. Could they really go back to what they once had? Could they even find a new version of their family, one that didn't feel broken? It was easier to remain guarded, to pretend that everything was fine, but deep down, Alex knew they were all struggling. He could see the cracks forming beneath the surface, and he was beginning to realize that they couldn't continue ignoring the pain that had been left unresolved for so long. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Alex found himself alone in the kitchen with Sarah. The house was quiet, and the familiar hum of the refrigerator and the soft creak of the floorboards were the only sounds in the room. Sarah was standing by the counter, fiddling with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. "I know it's not easy," she said, breaking the silence, her voice soft but filled with an emotion Alex couldn't quite place. "I don't expect things to change overnight, but I need you to know. I'm not going anywhere this time. I'm here. For you. For the kids." Alex leaned against the counter, watching her carefully. He wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that she could really stay this time, but the scars of the past lingered in his mind, preventing him from fully embracing her return. And what about the kids? They're not just going to forgive you like that, he said, his voice tight with frustration. They're angry, and they have every right to be. I know, Sarah replied, her voice breaking slightly. And I'm not asking them to forgive me. I'm asking for a chance to prove that I can be the mother they deserve. I can't undo what I did, but I can start over. I can try again. Alex felt a pang in his chest. He wanted to believe that things could change. He wanted to believe that this could be the fresh start they all needed. But the weight of the past was heavy, and he couldn't shake the feeling that no matter how hard they tried, they might never be able to repair the damage that had been done. But there was something else he couldn't ignore, Sarah's vulnerability. It was different from the woman who had walked out on them all those years ago. This Sarah was broken, too. She wasn't just asking for forgiveness, she was asking for a chance to rebuild, just as he had done. And maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward. Not by ignoring the past, but by confronting it head-on. Do you really think you can do this? Alex asked, his voice softening. Do you think you can just come back and everything will be okay? I don't know, Sarah whispered, looking up at him with a mixture of fear and hope. But I have to try. For them. For me. For us. Alex nodded slowly, his mind racing. He knew it wouldn't be easy. He knew that the road ahead would be filled with obstacles, with moments of doubt, anger, and hurt. But he also knew that if they were going to move forward, they couldn't continue living in the shadow of the past. They had to face it, no matter how painful it might be. That night, after Sarah had gone to bed, Alex found himself sitting alone in the living room, staring at the framed family photo on the wall. It was an old picture, taken before everything had gone wrong. Back when they were all happy, when they were whole. He traced his finger over the smiling faces in the photo, remembering a time when things felt simpler. But that was the past, and the present was here, messy, complicated, and uncertain. Alex had spent 10 years living in the aftermath of Sarah's departure, doing his best to keep the family together. But now, with her back, he had to face the fact that they were all changed. The kids, himself, even Sarah. No one was the same person they had been when she left. And that was the first step in this journey, acknowledging the truth. The next day, Alex gathered the kids in the living room. They were quiet, their faces still tense, as if bracing for the inevitable. He could feel the weight of their gazes on him, waiting for him to say something, anything, that might make sense of it all. Listen, I know things are complicated, Alex started, his voice steady but filled with emotion. But we can't keep pretending like nothing's changed. I know you're all angry, and I understand why. I'm angry, too. But we have to decide if we want to try to move forward. Not just for us, but for your mom, too. Emily crossed her arms, her expression defiant. You really think we can just forgive her, Dad? No, Alex said gently. I don't expect forgiveness right away. But I'm asking you to give her a chance. Not because you have to, but because it's the only way we can move forward. We can't keep living in the past, holding on to all this anger and hurt. We have to let go of some of it, at least enough to try. The room was silent for a long moment, as if the weight of his words had settled on them all. Finally, Emily spoke up, her voice quieter this time. I don't know if I can forgive her, Dad. I really don't. But, maybe I'll try. Alex nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope. It wasn't much, but it was a start. They weren't ready to embrace Sarah fully yet, but at least they weren't pushing her away entirely. Sarah, standing just outside the room, overheard the conversation. She felt a sharp pang in her chest. She knew this wouldn't be easy, that it would take time. But hearing Emily's words, hearing the possibility of forgiveness, made her believe that there was still a chance for them. It was a long road ahead, but they had taken the first step. Weeks passed, and while the household had settled into a new, uneasy rhythm, the emotional tension between Sarah and the kids remained. There were moments of small victories, like when Max asked Sarah for help with his math homework, or when Lucas allowed her to braid his hair for the first time since her return. These little gestures hinted at the possibility of healing, but the scars ran deep, and no amount of kindness could erase the hurt from the past. The biggest challenge, however, remained with Emily. As the eldest, she had felt the brunt of Sarah's absence more than anyone. She had become the glue holding the family together, and now, she was struggling to reconcile the woman who had abandoned them with the mother who was trying to make amends. Sarah's attempts to connect with Emily had been met with resistance, and each failed conversation left Sarah feeling like she was drowning in her own guilt and regret. One Saturday afternoon, when Alex had taken the younger kids out for a soccer game, Sarah saw an opportunity to finally speak to Emily alone. It wasn't planned, Sarah hadn't even intended to have this conversation, but there had been a shift in the air, a moment when the house felt quiet enough for real talk to happen. Emily was sitting on the couch, flipping through her phone, her face hard with the same cold expression that had become so familiar over the past few weeks. "Emily," Sarah began, her voice shaky but determined. "Can we talk?" Emily didn't look up. "About what?" she replied curtly, her tone flat. "There's not much to say." Sarah swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest. "I know I've let you down, more than anyone else. And I know that nothing I say can change that. I can't change the past, I know that. But I'm here now, and I want to make things right. I want to be your mom again. But I also know that you have every right to be angry with me." Emily's fingers froze on the screen of her phone, but she didn't look at Sarah. For a moment, there was silence, heavy, thick, like the air before a storm. Sarah waited, praying that Emily would say something, anything, to break the tension. Finally, Emily spoke, her voice raw and barely above a whisper. "I don't even know who you are anymore." Sarah felt as if she had been slapped across the face. The words cut deeper than she had imagined, and for a moment, she almost lost her composure. But she took a deep breath, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. "I know," Sarah said quietly, her voice trembling. "I don't expect you to see me as your mom again right away. I know it'll take time, and I'll be patient. I just want you to know that I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. But I'm so sorry for everything I put you through. I can't undo the hurt, but I can try to make up for it. Please, just give me the chance." Emily's eyes finally lifted to meet Sarah's. There was a flicker of emotion in her gaze, a mixture of sadness and disbelief, but still, the walls remained up. "I've spent years trying to hold everything together, to be the parent you couldn't be," Emily said, her voice trembling. "I had to be strong because you weren't here. I had to be the one to take care of my brothers and sisters. And now you expect me to just forgive you for walking out on us?" The words were bitter, raw, and they tore through Sarah like a knife. She wanted to explain herself, to tell Emily that she hadn't meant to abandon them, that she had been lost in her own struggles. But she knew that wasn't enough. The damage had been done, and no amount of words could fix it all. "I don't expect forgiveness," Sarah said, her voice barely audible. "I don't deserve it. But I am here now, and I want to prove that I can be the mother you need. If you'll let me, I'll try. I'll work every day to earn back your trust." Emily shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again, Mom. I don't know how." The pain in Emily's voice was more than Sarah could bear. For so long, Sarah had lived in denial, telling herself that one day she would be able to make everything right, that the love she had for her children could heal the wounds she had caused. But now, standing before Emily, she realized that healing wasn't a simple process. It wasn't about simply showing up, it was about proving her worth, every single day, through actions, not just words. "I understand," Sarah said, choking on her words. "I know I have to earn your trust. And I will. It's going to take time, but I'm willing to wait. I'll do whatever it takes." For a long moment, Emily didn't say anything. She just looked at Sarah, her eyes filled with tears and a mixture of pain and longing. And then, quietly, she spoke again. I just don't know if I can forgive you. Not yet. Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of the words settle in her chest. She had hoped for more, had hoped that Emily would be ready to begin the journey of forgiveness. But she understood that Emily was hurting, and no matter how much Sarah wanted to fix it, the only thing she could do now was give Emily the space to heal on her own terms. I know, Sarah whispered. But I'm here, Emily. And I always will be. And with that, Sarah turned and left the room, her heart heavy with the realization that this journey wasn't just about finding forgiveness, it was about rebuilding something that had been lost, and that could only be done over time. That night, as Alex returned home with the younger kids, he found Sarah sitting alone in the kitchen, her eyes red from crying. I tried, Sarah said softly, her voice thick with emotion. But I don't think she's ready to forgive me. Alex walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder, offering silent comfort. He didn't have the answers. He didn't know what the future held. But he did know one thing, they were both in this together, and whatever happened next, they had to face it as a family. The road ahead would be long, filled with more heartbreak and moments of doubt, but for the first time, Alex believed that they had taken an important step. The truth had come to light, raw and painful, and now there was no turning back. They were standing at the edge of a journey, one that would either break them or help them grow stronger. And in that moment, Alex didn't know which it would be. But he did know one thing for sure, they had to try. The days that followed the confrontation with Emily were a blur. Sarah went about the house in a daze, trying to go through the motions of everyday life, but everything felt hollow. She spent time with the younger kids, Max, Lucas, and Olivia, doing simple things like helping them with homework, making dinner, and reading stories at bedtime. But no matter how many times she smiled or tried to make a joke, it never quite reached her eyes. Every moment was filled with the constant ache of what she had lost and the fear of whether it was even possible to regain it. Alex, too, was silent. He could feel the weight of the tension between Sarah and Emily, the distance that had grown between them since her return. The emotional gulf seemed too wide to bridge, and he found himself wondering if they had all made a mistake in trying to bring Sarah back into their lives. Could a broken family ever truly be repaired? One evening, after putting the kids to bed, Alex sat with Sarah in the living room. The quiet between them was deafening. Neither of them knew what to say, as though words might only make things worse. But it had to be addressed. They couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. How are you doing? Alex finally asked, his voice soft but genuine. I know things have been tough lately. Sarah sighed, sinking into the couch beside him. I don't even know how to answer that. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells every day, trying to figure out if I'm doing the right thing, trying to fix things. But it feels like no matter what I do, I'm always falling short. Alex turned to her, his expression softening. He had seen this side of her before, the self-doubt, the insecurity that had plagued their marriage all those years ago. But now, it was different. She wasn't just worried about herself anymore. She was worried about the family she had left behind, and that made all the difference. You're not going to fix everything overnight, Alex said, his voice steady. This is going to take time. We all have our own wounds to heal. But just because it's hard doesn't mean it's impossible. You've got to give yourself some grace. Sarah looked at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. Do you really think it's possible? That we can all move past this? I don't know if I can fix what I've broken, Alex. I don't even know where to begin. Alex placed a hand on hers, his touch warm and comforting. We start with small steps. You don't have to have all the answers. Just take it one day at a time. But even as he spoke, Alex couldn't shake the doubt that lingered in the back of his mind. He wanted to believe that Sarah could come back into their lives, that they could somehow rebuild their family, but the reality was more complicated than just a simple promise of starting over. There was so much pain to untangle, so many years of resentment to work through. And then, of course, there was Emily, still holding on to her anger, still not ready to forgive. Later that week, Sarah decided to try something different. She had been avoiding the topic of Emily for days, but she knew that avoiding it wasn't going to help anything. Emily needed to know that she wasn't the enemy, that Sarah wasn't going to give up on her. So, with a deep breath, she knocked on Emily's bedroom door. "Can we talk?" Sarah asked, her voice gentle but filled with a quiet urgency. Emily looked up from her desk where she was writing something, her expression guarded. "About what?" she asked, her tone neutral but cold. "I know you're angry with me," Sarah began, sitting on the edge of Emily's bed. "I know I don't have the right to ask for your forgiveness. I don't even know if you'll ever forgive me. But I want you to know that I'm not going anywhere. And I'm not giving up on you. I'm sorry, Emily. So sorry for everything I put you through. I can't take back the past, but I want to be here for you now. Whatever you need, whatever it takes." Emily didn't respond right away. She just stared at Sarah, her eyes hard, almost as though she were measuring every word, every movement. Sarah's heart ached as she waited, not knowing what the response would be. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Emily sighed and put her pen down. "It's not that easy, Mom," she said, her voice softer now, though still full of pain. "I've spent so many years taking care of things, making sure the younger kids were okay, making sure Dad was okay. I didn't get to have a childhood, Mom. I didn't get to be just a kid because I had to be the parent. And now you expect me to just forget all of that?" Sarah's chest tightened with guilt. She had known it wouldn't be easy, but hearing Emily put it so plainly made the reality hit hard. Emily had been the one left to pick up the pieces, and now, it seemed impossible to bridge the gap between the girl who had been forced to grow up too soon and the woman who was trying to reclaim her role as mother. "I don't expect you to forget," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "I just want you to know that I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to do the work, Emily. I promise. I'll prove that I'm worthy of your trust. But I can't do it without you." There was silence for a long time, and for a moment, Sarah thought Emily was going to shut her out again. But then, to her surprise, Emily stood up and walked over to her. She stopped just a few inches away and, for the first time in weeks, looked her mother in the eye. "I don't know if I can forgive you," Emily said, her voice quieter now, though still edged with hurt. "But I'm willing to try. I'll give you the chance to prove it, okay?" Sarah's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was something. It was a glimmer of hope, a small sign that, maybe, just maybe, they could move forward, one step at a time. "Thank you," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "That's all I need." As Sarah walked out of Emily's room, she felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. This journey was far from over. In fact, they were only just beginning. But for the first time since she had returned, Sarah felt a flicker of hope, a hope that, no matter how long it took, they could heal. Together. The morning sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting soft rays across the kitchen table. Sarah had always loved mornings, when everything felt fresh, like the world was still full of possibilities. But now, even in the quiet moments, she couldn't shake the sense of urgency that had been her constant companion since her return. Time was running out. She had no idea how long Emily would be willing to give her, or if the younger kids were even fully processing the emotional weight of Sarah's reappearance. But one thing was clear, Sarah couldn't wait for things to magically fix themselves. If she was going to win back her family, she needed to take action, to prove to them that her presence wasn't just a temporary solution to their broken past. She had to show them that she was ready to rebuild the trust and love that had been lost over the years. As she sipped her coffee, Sarah heard the familiar sounds of the younger kids downstairs. Olivia, as usual, was bouncing around the house, full of energy, while Lucas and Max were dragging their feet as they made their way to the kitchen. They had gotten used to having Sarah around, but in a quiet, tentative way. They didn't know what to expect from her, and Sarah couldn't blame them for feeling uncertain. After all, she was a stranger in their eyes, someone who had abandoned them once and now reappeared, expecting to pick up where they had left off. "Morning, Mom." Olivia chirped as she skipped into the kitchen, a big grin on her face. It was a stark contrast to the way Emily had been, and for a brief moment, Sarah allowed herself to feel a small amount of relief. Olivia's innocence and open heart gave Sarah hope that perhaps she could reconnect with the kids, if she worked hard enough. "Good morning, sweetie," Sarah replied, her voice soft but steady. She pulled a bowl from the cabinet and began preparing breakfast. Max and Lucas wandered in shortly after, still half asleep but eager for the pancakes she had promised them the night before. As she cooked, she overheard them talking quietly amongst themselves, whispering about school or the soccer game they'd played yesterday. She smiled faintly, pleased that they were starting to feel comfortable enough to talk around her. It was small progress, but it mattered. "Are we still going to the park later?" Lucas asked, breaking Sarah out of her thoughts. "Of course," Sarah responded, trying to sound confident. "But only if you finish your breakfast first." Max laughed. "Don't worry, Mom. We'll finish. You know we're not leaving without that park time." As the breakfast table filled with chatter and laughter, Sarah couldn't help but feel a growing sense of gratitude. Despite everything, the younger kids were still here, still accepting her presence in their lives, even if they didn't fully understand everything that had happened. They were starting to believe again. She just hoped that Emily could eventually come around too. After breakfast, Sarah knew it was time to step up and face the biggest challenge of all, Emily. Emily had agreed to give her a chance, but that didn't mean the walls between them had come down. In fact, Emily seemed more distant than ever, reserved, with the kind of icy silence that said more than words could express. Sarah knew she had to approach her carefully, to tread lightly around the deep, unresolved anger that still simmered underneath the surface. After the kids left for school, Sarah found Emily sitting on the porch, her back turned to her, staring out at the backyard. Sarah hesitated at the door, unsure of what to say. There was so much she wanted to tell Emily, so much she wanted to explain. But she had learned from their last conversation that words alone wouldn't be enough. She needed to show Emily that she was committed to this, to prove that she wasn't just here for her own sake, but for the whole family. "Emily." Sarah called gently, her voice filled with quiet hope. Emily didn't turn around at first. The minutes stretched on in an uncomfortable silence before Emily finally spoke. "I'm not sure I can do this," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm not sure I can just let go of everything." Sarah walked slowly toward her, trying to match her pace to the hesitation in Emily's words. She sat down on the step next to her, careful not to invade Emily's space, giving her room to breathe. "I know it's hard," Sarah replied softly. "It's hard for me, too. I've never stopped thinking about you, about all of you. I know I can't fix everything overnight, but I'm willing to try. I'm not going to give up on you." Emily's eyes flickered toward Sarah, but she didn't speak for a moment. Instead, she wrapped her arms around her knees, her head down. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Mom. I just don't know if I can let go of the years I spent resenting you. I had to be both a daughter and a mother. I had to be both when you left us." Sarah's heart ached, but she swallowed her pain and nodded. "You shouldn't have had to do that, Emily. I never wanted that for you. I was weak, and I let you down. I didn't understand then what it meant to be a mother, what it really meant to be there for my kids." Emily's voice broke as she spoke again, and for the first time, Sarah saw a flicker of vulnerability in her daughter's eyes. "You think I wanted to be strong all those years? I didn't want to be the adult. I wanted to be a kid, Mom. But I had to grow up too fast. And now I'm stuck. I don't know who I am anymore." Sarah's throat tightened. The weight of Emily's words hit her like a freight train. She had taken so much for granted, her own identity, the simple privilege of being a mother, and now, all she had left was the raw, unspoken truth of what her absence had done. "I get it, Emily," Sarah said quietly. "I can't take back the past, but I want to help you rebuild. We can figure it out together. It won't be easy, but I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere." Emily didn't respond immediately. But after a long, heavy silence, she shifted slightly, meeting Sarah's eyes for the first time in what felt like forever. It wasn't a complete breakthrough, but it was something. A small crack in the wall that had kept them apart. "I'm not promising that I'll forgive you right away," Emily said, her voice steady but soft. "But I'll try. I'll try if you keep showing up. If you keep trying, like you say." Sarah nodded, the tears that had been threatening to fall finally spilling down her cheeks. "I will. I promise you, Emily. I won't stop trying. I'll keep showing up." For a brief moment, they sat in silence, the weight of their shared history between them. But even in the quiet, there was something new in the air, an unspoken understanding, a fragile hope that perhaps, with time, they could heal. The days continued to slip by, each one a quiet battle for Sarah. She tried to remain focused, to give herself the space she needed to heal while also tending to the needs of her children. The moments of connection with Emily were still few and far between, but they were there, small sparks of progress amidst the darkness of resentment and hurt. Sarah clung to these moments like a lifeline, holding on to the hope that one day the gaps between them would close, and their relationship could start afresh. But as time passed, she began to realize just how much damage had been done, how deep the wounds ran, not only between her and Emily, but also within the entire family. Every time Sarah attempted to have a conversation with one of her children, she felt like there was a shadow hanging over them, a constant reminder of the years lost. And sometimes, even when the words were spoken, there was a subtle hesitation, an unspoken fear that things would never truly be the way they once were. One evening, after dinner, Sarah sat at the kitchen table, exhausted. The children had retreated to their rooms to finish homework or unwind from the day, and the house felt quieter than usual. She stared at the empty space across from her, the place where Alex would normally sit, but tonight, he was still working late. She had gotten used to the silence when he wasn't around, but tonight it felt heavy, almost suffocating. Suddenly, she heard a knock at the door. Sarah glanced up, surprised. She wasn't expecting anyone. She hesitated for a moment before standing up and walking over to the door. When she opened it, she found Emily standing on the porch, her arms crossed over her chest, a familiar guarded expression on her face. "Hey," Emily said quietly, her voice soft yet uncertain. "Can I come in?" For a split second, Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected Emily to come to her, especially after everything they had been through. But Sarah was learning not to take these moments for granted. She opened the door wider, motioning for Emily to step inside. "Of course," Sarah replied, trying to keep her tone even, calm. "What's going on? Everything okay?" Emily hesitated before walking in, taking a seat at the kitchen table across from Sarah. She didn't say anything for a moment, her eyes fixed on the surface of the table as if searching for the right words. Sarah could feel the tension, the weight of the unspoken thoughts that hung between them. Finally, Emily spoke. "I've been thinking a lot, about everything," she began, her voice quieter now. "About what you said before. About trying. And I don't know, Mom. I don't know if I'm ready to forgive you. I'm not even sure what forgiveness would look like. How can I just forget what happened? How do I pretend like it never hurt?" Sarah's heart sank, the words hitting her like a punch to the stomach. She had always known this wouldn't be easy, but hearing Emily voice her doubts so plainly was like a slap in the face. "I'm not asking you to forget, Emily," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm not asking for some kind of magical reconciliation. I want you to know that I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. I want to make things right, as best as I can. Emily looked up, her eyes full of pain. But you left us. You left me. You chose to walk away. I had to grow up too fast, Mom. I had to take care of Max, Lucas, and Olivia, and I didn't have a choice. I didn't get to be a kid anymore. I know, Sarah whispered, her throat tightening. I know I failed you. And I can't undo that. I can't take back what I did. But I can't keep running from it either. I'm here now. I'm trying. And I'll keep trying, for as long as it takes. Emily's face softened for a brief moment, but it quickly hardened again. She stood up abruptly, her hands fidgeting with the edge of the table. I don't know what to do with all of this. How am I supposed to let you back in? How am I supposed to trust you again when you left us? Sarah stood up as well, her pulse quickening. She wanted to say something to reassure Emily, to make her believe that everything could be fixed. But the truth was, Sarah didn't have the answers. She didn't know how to heal the brokenness that had festered for so long. All she knew was that she had to keep trying. I'm not asking you to trust me right away, Sarah said, her voice trembling. I'm asking you to give me a chance. A real chance to prove that I'm not the same person I was before. I won't give up on you, Emily. I promise. Emily's lips trembled as she looked down at the floor, her hands pressed tightly together. Sarah could see the tears threatening to fall, but Emily was doing everything she could to hold them back. The pain in her daughter's eyes was more than Sarah could bear. I don't know if I can, Emily finally said, her voice breaking. I don't know if I can ever forgive you. But I'll try. I'll try if you keep showing up. If you keep trying. Maybe that's all we can do. For the first time in years, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't much, but it was something. They weren't there yet. They hadn't healed. But the possibility of healing was finally within reach. I will, Sarah said softly. I'll show up. Every day. No matter how long it takes. Emily nodded, wiping her eyes quickly before turning to leave. I need some time. But I'll be back. Just, give me time. As Emily walked out the door, Sarah stood frozen, the weight of her daughter's words still hanging in the air. She didn't have all the answers, and she couldn't fix everything in one moment. But for the first time since she had returned, Sarah felt a shift inside her, a small but significant shift that told her the path forward was possible. She couldn't erase the past, but maybe, just maybe, they could start anew. The house was eerily quiet the following day, the usual sounds of the kids bustling about replaced by a heavy silence that hung in the air. Sarah woke up early, the weight of yesterday's conversation with Emily still pressing on her chest. Despite the small breakthrough, Sarah could feel the distance between them like a chasm that couldn't be bridged in one conversation. And she knew, Emily wasn't the only one who needed healing. She did, too. She spent the morning trying to distract herself by tidying up the house, running her fingers across the surfaces, smoothing out wrinkles in the linens, and cleaning dishes that had already been washed the day before. But it was all just a distraction, a way to avoid thinking about what was truly eating at her, the fear of failure. What if Emily didn't come back? What if, after all this, they never found a way back to each other? Sarah was no stranger to disappointment. But the possibility of losing her daughter, of never regaining the connection they once had, felt like an unbearable weight. At breakfast, Max and Lucas were more reserved than usual, exchanging glances and whispering to each other as they pushed their food around their plates. Olivia was her usual bright and bubbly self, but even she could sense the tension in the air, a subtle difference from the warmth that had once filled their home. Mom? Max asked, breaking the silence. Is Emily okay? She's been acting weird. I don't know. I think she's mad at you. Sarah sighed, setting her coffee cup down with a soft clink. The truth was, she didn't know if Emily was okay. She didn't know how to answer Max's question without diving into the painful complexities of everything. But she owed her kids an explanation, at least in part. "I don't think she's mad, Max. But she's hurting," Sarah said, choosing her words carefully. "I hurt her, and it's not easy for her to forgive me. Sometimes people need time to heal, even if they love you." Max nodded, but there was something in his eyes, a quiet concern, a desire to understand, but also a hesitation to dig deeper. He and Lucas were growing up too fast, just like Emily had. "I get it," Lucas chimed in, his voice steady. "You just need to be patient, right? Like you always say." Sarah smiled, though it was a sad smile. "Yes, patience is key. And I'm trying. Every day." The kids didn't push her further, sensing the emotional weight of the conversation. Instead, they finished breakfast in a quiet, subdued atmosphere. After they left for school, Sarah was alone with her thoughts. She couldn't help but replay the conversation with Emily in her mind, dissecting every word, every pause. It wasn't just the anger Emily harbored that weighed heavily on Sarah's mind. It was the loss of the closeness they once shared, the easy way they could laugh together, confide in one another, and simply be a mother and daughter without all the baggage of resentment and pain. But the truth was, Sarah knew that Emily wasn't the only one with unresolved feelings. Sarah, too, had been carrying the weight of their past. She had never really confronted the reason she had left in the first place. She had never allowed herself to truly understand what had pushed her to walk away, to make the decision that tore her family apart. The more Sarah reflected on it, the clearer it became. She hadn't just abandoned them physically, she had abandoned herself, too. She hadn't known how to cope with her own struggles, and rather than face them head-on, she ran. She had left because, in that moment, running seemed easier than facing the truth of who she had become. But now, she couldn't hide from it any longer. The past couldn't be erased, no matter how much she wished she could forget. The only way forward was to confront it, to be honest with herself, with Emily, and with the kids. That evening, after the children were in bed, Sarah sat down on the couch, her hands resting on her lap as she stared at the empty space in front of her. Her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Alex. "Still working late. Do you need anything?" Sarah hesitated before typing a reply. She had kept so much of her internal struggle to herself. Maybe it was time to open up to him, to share what she was feeling. "No, I'm okay. Just thinking a lot." The text she sent back felt almost too vulnerable, but it was the truth. She couldn't hide from the reality any longer, and neither could Alex. If their marriage was going to survive this, they needed to be honest with each other. The next morning, Sarah woke up early, as usual, but this time, she wasn't content to just go through the motions. Today was the day she would face the truth of her past, no matter how difficult it would be. She knew that Emily needed her to be real with her, not just as a mother, but as a person who had flaws, who had made mistakes, and who was ready to face them head-on. After breakfast, Sarah found Emily sitting in the living room, flipping through a magazine with disinterest. There was a tension in the room, a palpable reminder of the unresolved conflict between them. Sarah sat down beside her, trying to gauge the right moment to speak. "I've been thinking a lot," Sarah started, her voice cautious. "And I want to tell you something. Something I've never said before." Emily didn't look up immediately, but Sarah could see her shoulders tense. "What's that?" Emily asked, her tone guarded. Sarah swallowed hard, gathering her courage. "I didn't leave because I didn't love you. I left because I didn't know how to love myself. And I thought running away would fix things, that it would make everything better. But it didn't. It never did. I was wrong, Emily. I should have stayed. I should have faced my problems, instead of leaving you all to deal with it." Emily looked up at her then, her expression softening just a little. "You left because you couldn't handle everything, huh?" she said quietly. "You thought leaving was easier than staying and facing the mess. Sarah nodded, her eyes filling with tears. Yes. I thought running away would make the pain go away. But it didn't. And it was the worst decision I ever made. The words hung in the air between them, heavier than Sarah had imagined. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. And yet, in that silence, Sarah could sense that something had shifted. Emily wasn't ready to forgive her yet. But there was a small piece of understanding between them now. The walls were starting to crack. "I'm sorry, Emily," Sarah said softly. "I'll never ask you to forgive me. But I hope, someday, you can see that I'm truly sorry." Emily didn't say anything at first. But after a few seconds, she gave a small nod. "I'll think about it, Mom." And for Sarah, that was enough. It wasn't a resolution, but it was progress. A small step forward, even if it felt like a giant leap in the right direction. Time passed slowly for Sarah, each day a new struggle and, simultaneously, a quiet moment of growth. The tension in the house remained, but it was different now. There was an unspoken agreement between Sarah and her children, a tentative truce. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Sarah knew that healing couldn't happen overnight, and even though the past still loomed large, she could sense small changes. Emily still kept her distance, and the silence between them sometimes felt like a chasm that couldn't be bridged. But there were moments when Sarah saw flickers of the daughter she had once known. It was the way Emily's lips would twitch into a smile when Sarah made a joke about the old days or the way she lingered by the kitchen when Sarah made her favorite dish. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was progress. It was something. Max and Lucas, too, were adjusting. They had always been resilient, but the weight of the past few years had left its mark. Max, with his quiet strength, would sometimes linger in the doorway, watching Sarah as she moved around the house. It was as though he was waiting for her to slip, to mess up again, but he wasn't ready to voice it. Lucas, ever the optimist, tried to bring lightness to every situation. He made sure to crack jokes or offer his help without being asked, filling the space with an energy that was both comforting and distracting. Sarah found herself grateful for their presence. The kids had never blamed her as much as she had blamed herself. They were resilient because they had no other choice, and their ability to adapt was something Sarah admired deeply. Yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to fix, so much more. One evening, after dinner, Sarah sat down with Olivia. The youngest of the group, Olivia's innocence and ability to forgive were a reminder of the way things used to be before everything changed. She had always been Sarah's little ray of sunshine, the one who made her laugh even when it felt like there was no reason to smile. Olivia had been quiet lately, as though the weight of the past was starting to settle on her small shoulders too. Sarah knew that her youngest child wasn't immune to the tension in the house, but Olivia hadn't yet learned to voice her worries. "Olivia, sweetie, can we talk?" Sarah asked gently, sitting next to her on the couch. Olivia looked up from the book she was reading, her eyes wide with curiosity. "About what, Mommy?" Sarah hesitated for a moment, searching for the right words. "About how you're feeling. I know things have been different since I came back, and I just want to make sure you're okay." Olivia blinked, as though she had to process the question. "I'm okay, Mommy," she replied, her voice small but not lacking in confidence. "But, sometimes I miss how things used to be. When you were here more, and we did fun stuff together." A knot tightened in Sarah's chest. She had always made time for Olivia, but in the chaos of rebuilding her relationships with the older kids, she had let the little moments with Olivia slip away. "I miss that too, sweetie," Sarah said, pulling her daughter closer. "I'm sorry for not being here the way I should have been. But I'm here now, and I promise I'll make more time for you." Olivia smiled up at her mother, her trust still intact despite everything. "Okay, Mommy. I know you're trying." And that was all it took. The little reminder that her children, despite their pain, despite their frustrations, still loved her. Still needed her. It was a small victory in the battle for their hearts, but it was one Sarah would hold on to. Because for all the silence and unresolved tension, the love was still there. And sometimes, that's all you need to begin rebuilding. Later that week, Sarah found herself with an unexpected visitor, Alex, who had come home early from work. He didn't announce himself with the usual flurry of movement or noise, but instead slipped quietly into the kitchen. His presence was a stark contrast to the tension that had defined their relationship for so long. They hadn't discussed the complexities of their marriage since Sarah's return, and while they had worked together to care for the kids, there was still much left unsaid. Alex pulled out a chair and sat down at the table, giving her a small, tentative smile. "Hey," he said, his voice low. "How are you holding up?" Sarah leaned back in her chair, folding her arms across her chest. The question was simple, yet somehow it felt like an opening, a crack in the wall that had been built up between them. "I'm trying," Sarah said quietly. "But it's not easy. I think I'm making progress, but there are still so many things we need to work through. Especially with the kids." Alex nodded thoughtfully, his fingers drumming against the table. He wasn't one for words when it came to emotional matters, but Sarah knew him well enough to sense that he, too, was struggling with the unspoken weight of the past. They hadn't addressed the pain of their separation, the brokenness of their marriage. And Sarah wasn't sure if now was the right time to go there. "I know," Alex said after a beat. "But we're in this together, Sarah. You don't have to carry all the weight yourself." His words were simple, but they held a truth that Sarah hadn't realized she needed to hear. She hadn't been carrying the weight alone. Not really. Even though they had been apart for so long, even though there was so much brokenness between them, Alex was still here. He was still trying. And for now, that was enough. "I don't know what the future holds," Sarah said softly, "but I want to try. For the kids. For us." Alex reached across the table, taking her hand in his. There was no grand declaration, no promises of instant change. But there was something in that touch, a small but undeniable connection, a willingness to move forward. "We'll figure it out," he said, his voice steady. "One step at a time." And that's what they did, step by step. Every small victory, every moment of honesty, was a step toward something new. Something better. There were no quick fixes, no immediate solutions. But Sarah was learning to embrace the process, to allow herself the grace to heal, and to hope that, in time, things would fall into place. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The weeks that followed continued with a quiet rhythm in the household. Sarah kept her promise to Olivia, making small changes that brought them closer again. They spent afternoons in the garden planting flowers, something they used to do all the time before the chaos of Sarah's departure. Those quiet moments, when Olivia would tug at her sleeve to ask about each flower's name or why certain flowers bloomed at different times of the year, filled Sarah's heart with warmth. But despite the small wins, Sarah knew the harder battles were still ahead. The unspoken tension with Emily persisted. It wasn't that Emily was actively hostile, but the walls between them remained too thick, too high to climb. Sarah wondered if she would ever truly reach her daughter again, if they could ever heal the deep wounds Sarah had inflicted. It wasn't just the silence from Emily that gnawed at Sarah, though. Alex had been more distant too, even though they had shared a few quiet conversations. Sarah could sense that their relationship was changing, but the change was unsettling, and neither of them seemed ready to acknowledge it fully. It wasn't until an unexpected encounter that things began to shift. One Sunday afternoon, Sarah decided to go to the local coffee shop to clear her head. She hadn't been there in ages, but something about the warm, familiar atmosphere called to her. She needed to get out of the house for a little while, to find a place where she could think without the constant reminders of everything that had been left unresolved. She walked into the coffee shop, the smell of freshly ground coffee beans filling the air. There was a soft hum of chatter, a light clinking of spoons against ceramic cups, and the comforting bustle of a place she once frequented when life was simpler. But as she made her way to the counter, her eyes landed on a figure she hadn't seen in years. It was Amanda, one of her oldest friends, the one she had lost touch with after everything fell apart. Amanda had been a part of Sarah's life before she left, and despite the distance Sarah had created between herself and the world during her absence, seeing Amanda felt like a flash of warmth in the coldness of Sarah's emotions. Amanda's eyes widened as she saw Sarah standing there, a mix of surprise and something softer flickering across her face. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The years apart had taken their toll, leaving behind an awkwardness neither of them had expected. "Well, well," Amanda said with a small, nervous laugh, stepping closer. "Look who finally shows up." Sarah's heart squeezed at the familiar sound of Amanda's voice, the easy warmth that she had missed. Wow, I didn't expect to run into you today. How've you been?" Amanda shrugged, but the smile that tugged at her lips didn't quite reach her eyes. "You know. Life. Busy. I heard you were back in town, but I didn't think we'd cross paths like this." "I've been trying," Sarah said, feeling the weight of the conversation that was about to unfold. "Things have been complicated. A lot of things to work through." Amanda nodded knowingly, her gaze flickering toward the counter. "I can imagine. I know you've been through a lot." Sarah's heart gave another painful tug at the mention of the word, a lot. There had been so much loss, so much pain, and yet it felt like she had never truly talked to anyone about it, not in the way she needed to. "Maybe we should talk," Sarah suggested, her voice a little tentative. "I don't know. I haven't really had a chance to just talk." Amanda gave a small, understanding smile and gestured toward a table in the corner. "Let's sit. It's been too long." The two of them settled into a corner booth, the noise of the coffee shop fading into the background. For a while, neither of them spoke, both lost in the weight of the past. But it was Amanda who finally broke the silence. "You know," she began softly, "I always wondered why you left. We all did. But I never really asked you. I figured you had your reasons." Sarah looked at her old friend, the familiarity of Amanda's presence almost painful. "I didn't leave because I didn't love anyone. I left because I couldn't face myself. I thought I could escape the things I couldn't deal with by walking away. But it only made everything worse." Amanda's eyes softened. "You know, Sarah, it's okay to admit that. It's okay to admit that you were struggling. It's okay to admit that you weren't perfect." "I wasn't just struggling," Sarah whispered. "I was broken. And I didn't know how to fix myself, let alone anyone else. I thought I was protecting everyone by leaving, but I wasn't. I was just running." Amanda nodded slowly, her hand resting on the table. "I can't pretend to understand everything you went through. But I do know that you're here now. And that matters." Sarah's chest tightened with emotion. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to make up for everything I've done, but I want to try. I want to be better, for the kids, for everyone I've hurt." Amanda met her gaze with a deep, knowing look. "You're already doing that. Just by facing it. By not running anymore. That's the first step." The conversation felt like a release, a soft, comforting exhale after years of holding everything inside. It was strange, this connection that had been dormant for so long, now coming back to life with ease. "I've missed this," Sarah said quietly, her voice full of emotion. "I've missed having someone to talk to about everything." Amanda smiled gently. "We've all been waiting for you to come back, Sarah. Not just to the house, but to yourself. We all knew you had it in you." Tears prickled at the corners of Sarah's eyes, but she fought them back, not wanting to fall apart in front of her friend. She had done so much of that already. But there was something about hearing Amanda's words that gave her hope. Maybe she could forgive herself, just a little, if others still saw the woman she once was, the woman she wanted to be again. Thank you, Sarah said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. I didn't realize how much I needed this. Amanda squeezed her hand, a small but meaningful gesture. Anytime, Sarah. I'm here. As Sarah left the coffee shop later that afternoon, her heart felt lighter. She had found forgiveness in unexpected places, and she knew she still had a long road ahead. But maybe, just maybe, the road wasn't as long as she had once believed. The truth was, she couldn't fix everything overnight. But she was trying. And that was enough for today. A few days passed after Sarah's unexpected meeting with Amanda, but the conversation continued to echo in her mind. The weight of everything she had left unsaid, the feelings she had buried for so long, came rushing to the surface with an intensity that felt both liberating and terrifying. It was as if the universe had finally given her a moment of clarity, reminding her that healing wasn't a destination but a process. The question was, how would she handle it? She didn't know if she was ready to face all the pieces of her past, especially the ones that were buried the deepest. But she knew it was time. Time to confront the people she had hurt the most, time to deal with the parts of her that still felt broken. And it started with Emily. The night was quiet, the house bathed in soft shadows as Sarah walked past the living room. She stopped in the doorway, looking at Emily, who was curled up on the couch with her phone in hand, scrolling through something. Sarah hesitated for a moment, wondering if this was the right time. She could feel the tension between them still, a wall built not just by time, but by anger, hurt, and betrayal. But tonight, she had to try. Emily. Sarah said softly, stepping into the room. Emily looked up, her face unreadable. Yeah. Can we talk? Sarah asked, her voice tentative. About everything. Emily didn't immediately respond. Instead, she set her phone aside and straightened up on the couch, crossing her arms over her chest. The silence between them was thick, filled with all the things they hadn't said to each other in years. Sarah felt a knot form in her throat. I know it's not easy, Sarah continued. I know I hurt you. I know I left you and the others when you needed me most. And I don't know how to make up for that. I can't undo it. But I want to try. I want to try to fix the things I broke. Emily's gaze flickered to the floor, and for a moment, Sarah thought her daughter might say nothing, might turn away, like she had so many times before. But then Emily looked back up, her eyes full of something Sarah couldn't quite place. You really think you can just fix everything by saying sorry? Emily's voice was low, but there was no mistaking the edge in it. You can't just walk back into our lives and pretend like everything is okay. Sarah winced at the truth in Emily's words. It stung more than she expected. Of course Emily was angry, how could she not be? I don't expect things to be okay right away. I know I have to earn your trust again, but I am trying, Emily. Every day, I'm trying. Emily's eyes narrowed, her arms tightening around her chest. You left us, Mom. You didn't just leave the house or Dad, you left me. You left all of us. And I don't know if I can forgive you for that. The rawness of Emily's pain hit Sarah like a physical blow, and for a moment, she didn't know how to respond. She had never allowed herself to truly face the magnitude of what she had done to her family. She had left, yes, but she hadn't realized how deeply it had cut them until now. I don't expect forgiveness, Emily, Sarah said quietly. I just want a chance to make things right. I don't want to be the person who walked out anymore. I want to be the person you can trust, even if it takes time. Emily's eyes softened just a fraction, but it wasn't enough to break through the years of pain and resentment. You should have thought about that before you left, she said, standing up from the couch. Maybe you could have saved us all a lot of heartache if you had. But you didn't, did you? Sarah stood there, helpless for a moment, her heart breaking all over again. I was selfish, Emily. I know that. I was running from everything, and I thought that leaving would make it easier. But all it did was make everything worse. Emily shook her head, her voice thick with emotion. You're right. It did make everything worse. I don't know if I can forgive you for that. Maybe I'll never be able to. The words hung in the air, heavy with truth. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah let the silence settle between them, not trying to fill it with empty words, but allowing both of them to sit with the reality of where they were. I understand, Sarah said softly. I know I've done too much damage to fix in one conversation, in one day, or even in 1 year. But I'm here. I'm not going anywhere this time. Emily didn't respond, but there was a shift in her expression, a slight softening, though still guarded. She walked past Sarah without saying another word, heading upstairs to her room, leaving Sarah standing there, her heart heavy with regret but also with the glimmer of something else. Hope. It wasn't much, but it was something. Later that night, as Sarah lay in bed, she thought about what Emily had said. Could she ever be forgiven? Was it even possible to heal the wounds that ran so deep? She didn't know. But she knew one thing, she couldn't stop trying. For herself. For her kids. The journey to forgiveness was long, and it wouldn't be smooth, but it had started. And that was enough for now. The next day, after another long and painful silence between her and Emily, Sarah found herself at a crossroads in her relationship with Alex. They had spent so much time focusing on the kids, on everything else, that they had hardly spoken about what had happened between them. Their marriage had been shattered in ways both big and small, and while the physical distance had been bridged by their shared responsibility for their children, the emotional distance remained a vast chasm. That morning, over breakfast, Sarah decided it was time to address it. Alex, Sarah said, looking up from her coffee cup, we need to talk. Alex didn't look up from his paper at first, but he eventually put it down and met her gaze. About what? About us, Sarah replied, her voice steady, but her hands trembling slightly. I know we've been focused on the kids, but I think it's time we face what's between us. Alex's expression softened, but there was a hint of something else, perhaps fear or uncertainty. What do you want to say, Sarah? I don't know if we can fix what's been broken between us, she began, but I don't want to ignore it any longer. I can't pretend we're fine, and neither can you. But I'm here, trying. For you, for me, for the kids. I want to try. Alex studied her for a long moment. You've been trying. I see it. But I don't know if trying is enough. Sarah felt a pang in her chest, the old ache returning. Then let's figure it out together. I don't want to be alone in this anymore. And I don't want you to be alone either. For a moment, the room was filled with the weight of everything unsaid. But there, in that quiet space, was the faintest flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other, step by step, just like everything else. The following days after the conversation with Emily and Alex felt like walking on a tightrope. Each step forward felt precarious, a balancing act of words unspoken, emotions just beneath the surface, and the raw vulnerability of facing all the damage that had been done. Sarah knew this was only the beginning, and yet, the smallest movements, moments of connection with her children, fleeting moments of quiet understanding with Alex, gave her hope that perhaps they could rebuild, piece by piece. Still, the quiet tension with Alex lingered. Every time they shared a moment, whether it was in passing or sitting across from each other at the dinner table, the weight of the unspoken was palpable. There was no easy solution. No clear path forward. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was the hardest part, the waiting. The wondering if the person she was, the person she used to be, was enough for them to trust her again. Sarah spent her days focusing on the children. Olivia had grown even closer to her in the last few weeks, following her everywhere around the house, chatting with her in that cheerful voice that had once been so distant. Sarah would stop what she was doing just to listen to Olivia's stories, even when they seemed trivial, because every word felt like a bridge back to the life she had missed. But it was Emily who still held the deepest hurt in her eyes. No matter how many times Sarah tried, how many small gestures she made, Emily's coldness never truly thawed. The silence between them was suffocating, a constant reminder of everything that had been lost. One night, as Sarah was cleaning up the kitchen, she heard Emily's footsteps behind her. She didn't turn right away, unsure of what to expect. Emily rarely approached her unless it was necessary. "Mom," Emily's voice was quiet, almost tentative. It was the first time in days she had spoken to her without anger lacing her words. Sarah turned, wiping her hands on the dish towel, unsure of how to react. "What is it, honey?" Emily hesitated, her eyes flickering with emotion. "I don't know what to do with all of this. You're back, and everything feels different. I don't know how to be with you anymore." Sarah's heart ached at the honesty in Emily's voice. "I know," she whispered. "I know it's hard. But I want you to know, I'm not going anywhere this time. I'm here for you, whether you want to talk or not. I just need you to know that I'm trying. I'll keep trying." Emily's face remained unreadable for a moment, and for a terrifying second, Sarah thought she would turn away again, that this tiny moment of hope would disappear like the others. But then Emily took a step closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not saying it's going to be okay right now. But maybe, we can try. Maybe we can just try." The air between them shifted, not with dramatic gestures, but with the soft acknowledgement of how far they had fallen. This was not forgiveness, not yet, but it was something. It was a crack in the wall. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt a glimmer of possibility, a sliver of hope that, with time, they could rebuild the relationship that had once been unbreakable. The conversation with Emily marked a turning point, but Sarah knew that her relationship with Alex needed the same kind of attention. It had been weeks since they had truly talked about their marriage, the hurt, the loss, the deep fractures that had formed over the years. The physical proximity they shared, the shared responsibilities of raising their children, was no substitute for the emotional closeness they once had. Every day, they lived in the same house, under the same roof, but they were still separated by so many unsaid things. That evening, Sarah found Alex sitting on the porch, staring into the darkening sky, his mind clearly elsewhere. The familiar sound of crickets filled the air, but the silence between them was heavy, almost unbearable. Sarah didn't hesitate this time, she sat down beside him, close enough to feel his warmth, but not so close as to make him uncomfortable. "Alex," she said softly, her voice steady, though the vulnerability in her chest was palpable. "We can't keep pretending like everything's fine, can we?" Alex turned to her, his face guarded, but his eyes revealed a flicker of pain. "I know. I've been waiting for you to say something. I don't know if I have the right words," Sarah admitted, her voice raw. "But I'm here, Alex. I'm not running away anymore. I don't expect things to magically go back to how they were, but I don't want to keep living like we're two strangers in the same house." Alex looked away for a moment, processing her words. Then, finally, he spoke, his voice quieter than she had ever heard it. "I don't know if I can trust you again, Sarah. It's not about you coming back, it's about everything you left behind. The mess, the hurt. I can't just forget that." Sarah nodded slowly, understanding the depth of his pain. "I know. And I don't want you to forget it. But I'm not asking for forgiveness right now. I'm just asking for a chance. For us to figure out if we can still find our way to each other. I don't want to keep pretending like we're okay when we're not." Alex was silent for a long time, the weight of the conversation hanging between them. Finally, he looked back at her, his expression softening. "I don't know if I can, Sarah. I'm scared. I'm scared of getting hurt again." The honesty in his words hit her harder than she expected, and it hurt more than she thought it would. But she didn't flinch. She knew she couldn't rush this. She had to prove, through her actions, that she was there to stay. "I'm scared too," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But I'm not going anywhere. I'm here, Alex. I want to try. For us. He didn't respond right away, and the silence that followed was not uncomfortable, but heavy. It was a moment of reflection, a quiet understanding that this wasn't going to be easy. But Sarah felt something shift between them, a fragile understanding that perhaps they could try to rebuild. Slowly, piece by piece. The following weeks were filled with more moments like these, tentative steps toward rebuilding relationships, fragile conversations that exposed the rawest parts of themselves. It wasn't perfect. There were still days filled with tension, moments when words didn't come as easily as Sarah hoped. But there were also small victories. Olivia, once the shyest and most reserved, had started to open up more, talking to Sarah about her day and even confiding in her about the things she didn't feel comfortable telling anyone else. Sarah realized that Olivia had been the most affected by her absence, but now, with every small step forward, Sarah felt the distance between them shrink. As for Emily, though their conversations were still few and far between, there was a flicker of hope that perhaps, with time, they could heal the wounds that had been created. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight. But the crack in the wall was there, and that was enough for Sarah. There was still so much left to rebuild, so much left unsaid, but for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt like she was no longer running from the past. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step to healing. The days began to blur together as Sarah struggled to keep her focus on what was truly important. The kids were adjusting, Emily's standoffishness softened just a little bit more each day, and even Alex seemed less distant, though the chasm between them was far from closed. But in all the uncertainty, there was one thing Sarah was certain of: she was not the same person she had been when she left. She had come back, yes, but in a way, she had also come back to herself. The house was quieter now, as if it, too, was holding its breath. The kids were all at school, and the house felt strangely empty. Sarah took a deep breath as she stood in the living room, looking out the window, her mind racing. She had been so focused on the past, on repairing what she had broken, that she hadn't stopped to think about what she needed, what she wanted. She couldn't ignore it any longer. The question gnawed at her: what was she truly seeking? Redemption? Forgiveness? Or was she simply trying to put the pieces of a life back together, without really considering if it was the life she wanted anymore? She walked toward the kitchen and picked up the phone. Her fingers hovered for a moment, but then she dialed a number she hadn't dialed in a long time. "Hi, it's Sarah," she said when the phone rang. "I need to talk." It wasn't until the next afternoon that she received the reply, an invitation to meet. Sarah, feeling a sense of nervous anticipation, drove to the small cafe that had been their spot for so many years before she had left. The familiar sight of the old brick building, the chalkboard sign out front, and the bell above the door triggered memories she had long pushed aside. Sarah stepped inside, feeling the cool air of the cafe against her skin, and there, at the far corner table, was someone she hadn't seen in years: her mother. The woman who had raised her, the woman whose approval she had always sought, even when she couldn't admit it to herself. Her mother looked the same as always, her silver hair neatly styled, her glasses perched on the bridge of her nose. She looked up as Sarah approached, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Sarah," her mother greeted softly, her voice warm but guarded. "It's been a long time." Sarah sat down slowly, feeling an unfamiliar nervousness in her chest. "I know. I wasn't sure if you'd want to meet." Her mother's expression softened, and she reached across the table, taking Sarah's hand in hers. "Of course I wanted to meet. I didn't know where you were, what had happened to you." "I'm sorry, Mom," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I didn't mean to disappear. Her mother squeezed her hand. "I know, dear. I know. You were always so determined to do things on your own. But that doesn't mean I wasn't worried. I've made so many mistakes," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "I hurt so many people, especially you and Dad. I don't know if I can make up for it, but I'm trying. Her mother nodded, her eyes misting with unshed tears. I've always believed in you, Sarah. Even when you didn't believe in yourself. And you'll always have my support, even if you feel like you don't deserve it. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the weight of everything that had happened between them filling the air. Sarah felt like she was sitting on the edge of a precipice, knowing that she couldn't go back to the person she was, but wondering if she could move forward into a future where forgiveness, both from herself and others, was possible. Do you think it's possible to rebuild everything? Sarah asked quietly. All the relationships I've broken, all the damage I've caused. Can it be fixed? Her mother looked at her, her expression thoughtful. I think it depends on what you're willing to do, Sarah. Rebuilding isn't easy. It takes time. And it takes honesty, about yourself and what you want. If you're willing to work at it, if you're willing to be patient with yourself and with others, then yes, it can be fixed. But only if you're willing to be real. Sarah nodded, her chest tightening. It was exactly what she needed to hear. I think I'm ready to be real. Her mother smiled, a mixture of pride and sadness in her eyes. Then you'll find your way, Sarah. It won't be easy, but you've always had the strength to keep going, even when things seemed impossible. The conversation continued for hours, and as Sarah listened to her mother's wisdom, she began to feel a shift inside of her, a shift that, for the first time in a long time, made her believe that perhaps there was hope for the future after all. As she drove back home, Sarah reflected on the conversation with her mother. It had been cathartic, a release of years of tension, hurt, and unresolved emotions. But it had also been a reminder that forgiveness, true forgiveness, was a slow and delicate process. The people she had hurt weren't going to forgive her just because she wanted them to. She had to show them through her actions, not just words. When Sarah returned home, she found the house quiet again. The kids were still at school, and Alex was nowhere to be found. She felt the familiar weight of solitude settle over her, but this time, it wasn't as heavy. She knew that the journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, she felt ready to face it head-on. She walked upstairs and entered her bedroom, where she stopped in front of the mirror. The reflection staring back at her was not the same person who had left years ago. She was older, certainly, and the lines on her face told a story of pain, struggle, and loss. But there was something else too, something that had been missing for so long. She saw the woman she was becoming, not the woman she had been. And that woman was strong. A knock on the door broke her reverie. It was Emily, standing there hesitantly, her eyes searching Sarah's face for something she couldn't quite name. "Mom," Emily said quietly, her voice softer than Sarah had heard in a long time, "can we talk?" Sarah smiled, her heart swelling with emotion. "Of course, honey. We can talk about anything." As they sat down together, the walls between them seemed just a little bit thinner. There was still a long road ahead, but this time, it felt like they were walking it together. And that was all Sarah needed to believe that, perhaps, just perhaps, the pieces of their broken family could be put back together again. The days blurred into each other after that afternoon with Emily. Sarah had hoped that the conversation would be the breakthrough she needed, but the reality was more complicated. Emily was still distant, still unsure of how to reconcile the person she had known her mother to be with the woman who had returned after years of absence. There were no quick fixes, no magic words to erase the hurt and the years of silence. Still, Sarah remained determined. She knew that healing was going to be a long process, and that meant showing up every single day. It wasn't just about apologizing or saying the right things, it was about proving, through every action, that she was here to stay, that she was committed to repairing the relationships she had fractured, especially with Emily. The house was still quieter than it used to be, and the silence was often suffocating. Emily spent more time in her room, immersed in her studies and whatever distractions she could find. Olivia, on the other hand, had become a bright spot in Sarah's day, her laughter a welcome sound. The two of them spent time together baking cookies, talking about everything and nothing at all, and Sarah began to feel like she was rediscovering the bond she had once had with her youngest daughter. But even as Sarah enjoyed these quiet moments with Olivia, she couldn't shake the growing sense of unease in her chest. The issues with Emily were still unresolved, and her relationship with Alex was just as fragile. They were walking a tightrope between old wounds and the possibility of something new, but neither of them knew how to find the balance. One evening, Alex came home later than usual. Sarah was in the kitchen, prepping dinner when she heard the door open and close softly. She didn't immediately turn around, but she felt the familiar tension in the air. When he entered the kitchen, his tired eyes met hers, and she noticed the weight of something unsaid between them. "Hey," Alex said quietly, his voice low but warm. "Hey," Sarah replied, offering him a small smile. "Long day?" "Yeah," he answered, running a hand through his hair. "It's been a lot of late meetings. I didn't even realize how late it was getting." There was an awkward pause. They stood across from each other, neither knowing exactly how to start the conversation they both knew was coming. Alex cleared his throat. "Listen, Sarah, we need to talk." Sarah nodded slowly, her heart already pounding in her chest. "Yeah, we do." He stepped closer, leaning against the counter. "I've been thinking about everything, about us, about the kids. I know things aren't easy right now, and honestly, I'm still figuring out how to move forward. But I need to know, are you really here for the long haul? Or is this just another attempt at fixing things temporarily before you run again?" The rawness of his words took Sarah by surprise, and she could feel her throat tighten with emotion. "I'm not going anywhere, Alex. I swear, I'm here. I know I messed up, and I don't expect you to forgive me overnight, but I'm here. I want this, us, to work. I want to make things right, even if it takes time." Alex looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "I need you to be honest with me, Sarah. I'm scared. I've been scared ever since you left. I don't know if I can trust that you won't leave again." "I don't know how to prove it to you," Sarah said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm not running. Not this time. I'll do whatever it takes to rebuild what we've lost." Alex exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. "I want to believe you. I really do. But this isn't just about us, is it? It's about the kids. They're not just going to forget what happened." Sarah felt a pang in her chest at the mention of their children. She had always placed the blame for her leaving squarely on her own shoulders, but hearing Alex acknowledge the effect it had had on their kids made the weight of it feel even heavier. "I know," she whispered. "I know it's going to take time with them too. But I'm not going to give up. I can't. I've already lost so much." Alex took a step closer, his expression softening. "I'm not asking you to fix everything overnight. But I need to see that you're not giving up either." "I'm here, Alex," Sarah repeated, her voice stronger now, the conviction in her words echoing in the space between them. "I promise you, I'm here to stay." They stood in silence for a long moment, the tension between them easing just slightly. Neither of them had all the answers, and both of them were still carrying the weight of their past. But in that moment, Sarah knew one thing for sure, she wasn't going to walk away again. Not this time. The following days brought no immediate changes, but there was a shift. Emily, though still guarded, began to engage more with Sarah, answering questions about school, chatting about her day, even if only in brief sentences. Olivia's smiles became more frequent, and Sarah found herself spending more time helping her with homework, reading books together, and rekindling the bond they had once shared. But the cracks in her relationship with Alex were still there, thin and fragile. Every conversation, every shared glance, felt like it could either deepen the divide or bridge the gap between them. Sarah didn't know how long it would take for them to rebuild, but she knew one thing for certain, she was ready to put in the work. One afternoon, after the kids had come home from school, Alex and Sarah found themselves alone in the living room. The house was quiet, the soft hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the background. Sarah could feel the tension creeping back in, and she knew that they couldn't keep avoiding the deeper issues between them. Alex turned to her, his gaze steady. "Sarah, I need to ask you something." "Okay," Sarah replied, her heart already racing. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm ready," she said, even though she wasn't sure if she was. Alex looked at her for a long moment before he spoke again, his words heavy with the weight of everything they had been through. "Do you really believe we can fix this? Everything that's happened? Or is this just a way to pretend that we're okay?" Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She had been asking herself the same question for weeks. But when she looked at Alex, she didn't see the man who had left her years ago. She saw the man she had once loved, the father of her children, the person who had stood beside her through the best and worst of times. "I believe we can," she said softly, her voice filled with quiet certainty. "I believe we can fix this, Alex. But it's going to take time. It's not going to be easy, and there will be days when we'll want to give up. But I'm not going to. I'm not going to let us fall apart again." Alex studied her for a long moment, and then slowly, he nodded. "Okay. Then we'll take it one step at a time. Together. Together." Sarah couldn't help but feel a spark of hope in her chest, a fragile but real feeling. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. The weeks that followed were a constant push and pull. There were moments of hope, followed by moments of doubt. Sarah could feel the tension with Alex still hanging in the air, thick and unspoken. They both tried to navigate the treacherous waters of rebuilding trust, but every now and then, it felt as if the ground beneath them was still unstable. The scars from the past weren't easily erased, and while they were both trying, neither knew exactly how to move forward without feeling the weight of their shared history. One evening, after dinner, Sarah found herself standing at the kitchen counter, sorting through papers that had been piling up. Her mind was wandering, drifting between the kids' school events, work, and everything else she had to manage. But something kept pulling her back to a single thought: her relationship with Alex. It had been weeks since they'd had that conversation about rebuilding, but the effort felt one-sided. He was still distant at times, retreating into himself when things got too heavy. Sarah knew he was struggling, too, he always had, but now, it felt like there was more at stake. It wasn't just their relationship anymore, it was the future of their family. The sound of the front door opening interrupted her thoughts. She turned around to see Alex walking in, his face tight with a mixture of exhaustion and something else, something unreadable. "Hey," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Hey," Sarah replied, her voice tentative. "How was your day?" "Busy," Alex replied, rubbing his temples as if he were trying to ward off the headache he could never escape. "You know how it goes." Sarah nodded, then hesitated before asking, "Alex, do you think we're making progress? Or are we just pretending to move forward?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. The vulnerability in his gaze caught her off guard, and for a moment, they were silent, both of them standing in the same space, yet still feeling a million miles apart. "Honestly," he finally said. "I don't know. I don't know if we're getting anywhere, or if we're just treading water. There are days when I feel like we're going backward, but then other days, I think maybe we're finally starting to make it work. I don't want to screw it up again." Sarah felt a pang in her chest, a deep ache she knew all too well. She took a breath, steadying herself before speaking. "I don't want to screw it up either. But I'm not going to run, Alex. I swear I'm not. I know we've both made mistakes, but I want to try. I want to fix this. I just need you to be here with me, really here, not holding back." Alex's eyes softened. "I want that too, Sarah. But it's hard. You know that, right?" "I know," she whispered. "But we can't keep walking around the same circle, Alex. We have to choose something. We have to choose to move forward, even if it's one step at a time. There was a long silence as they stared at each other, both of them carrying the weight of years of hurt, but also a flicker of hope, a tiny, fragile spark that they weren't ready to extinguish just yet. Later that evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Sarah found herself staring out the window, lost in thought. Alex had gone to bed without saying much more, but she could tell that the conversation had affected him. They hadn't solved anything, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like they were both willing to try. But there was still the question of Emily. Of how to bridge the gap between mother and daughter, how to rebuild that trust that had been shattered so many years ago. Sarah had spent so many years running from the pain, running from the guilt, and now, she had to face it head-on. She couldn't expect Emily to forgive her overnight, but she could keep showing up, keep trying to earn back the trust she had lost. The next day, Emily came home from school in a surprisingly good mood. She was still quiet, still guarded, but there was something different about her today. She was smiling, her eyes softer than Sarah had seen them in a while. "Hey, Emily," Sarah called out as Emily entered the living room. "How was school?" Emily shrugged, setting her backpack down. "It was okay. Not bad. How's everything with you?" Sarah smiled, feeling a flicker of warmth spread through her chest. "It's good. Busy, you know how it is. But I'm doing okay." There was a brief silence before Emily spoke again. "Mom, can we talk?" Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She had been waiting for this moment, not sure when it would come, but now that it was here, she was nervous. "Of course, honey," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "What's on your mind?" Emily took a deep breath, sitting down next to Sarah on the couch. "I don't know how to say this, but I don't hate you, you know. I don't. I don't think I ever really did. I was angry, yeah. But I was just. I didn't know how to deal with everything. With you leaving. And then you coming back, and everything changing again." Sarah's heart swelled with relief, though she could tell Emily was still working through a lot of pain. "I know, honey. I know I hurt you. I can't take back what I did, but I can promise you that I'm not going anywhere this time. I'm here for you, for all of you." Emily nodded slowly, her eyes filling with unshed tears. I don't want to feel like this anymore. I don't want to hold on to all the anger and the hurt. I want to try to. I don't know, move on. But it's hard." Sarah reached out, placing her hand on Emily's. "I know it's hard. And it's going to take time. But I'm here, Emily. I'm not going to rush you. We'll go at your pace. But I need you to know that I love you. And I'm so sorry for everything." For the first time in what felt like forever, Emily met her gaze, her lips trembling slightly as she whispered, "I love you too, Mom. I don't know how to fix this." "We'll figure it out together," Sarah said softly, her voice filled with determination. "One step at a time." As the days turned into weeks, Sarah could feel the walls between her and Emily beginning to crumble, slowly but surely. They spent more time together, talking, laughing, and even disagreeing at times. But it was progress. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt like she was really getting to know her daughter again, not as a stranger, but as the person she had once known so well. The road ahead was still uncertain, but Sarah was no longer afraid to walk it. She wasn't alone anymore. She had her family, her strength, and the knowledge that rebuilding, though difficult, was possible. It had been a few months since that pivotal conversation with Emily. Sarah had allowed herself to believe that things could finally be getting better. Emily had started to come around in ways that surprised her. While there were still difficult moments, the tension between them had lessened. Emily was talking to her more, about school, friends, and sometimes even about how much she resented the years of silence between them. But they were talking. And that was a breakthrough Sarah hadn't expected. That afternoon, Sarah found herself sitting at the kitchen table, looking over the calendar. It had been a busy few months, meetings for work, school events, and the day-to-day responsibilities of being a mother. But there was something new in the air. Sarah couldn't quite pinpoint it, but it was there, like the first hint of spring after a long, cold winter. The sound of footsteps behind her made her turn, and there stood Alex, looking a little worn from his day at work, but his eyes holding a depth that hadn't been there in weeks. "Hey," he greeted her softly, his hands tucked into his pockets. "What's on your mind?" Sarah smiled faintly, still surprised by how much they had learned to communicate with fewer words. "Just thinking. About everything. How far we've come. And how far we still have to go." Alex nodded, sitting down across from her. "I've been thinking about that too. Things are better, right? With Emily, with Olivia, with us." "They are," Sarah said quietly. "But sometimes it still feels like we're not quite there yet. Like there's this invisible wall between us, even when we're both trying to tear it down." Alex leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling as he thought. "It's like we're stuck, isn't it? Like we're not moving forward, but we're not going backward either. Just, existing." "I don't want to just exist," Sarah replied, her voice firm. "I want to live again. I want us to live. To truly live, together." The air between them shifted. It wasn't the kind of shift that made things instantly perfect, but it was enough for Sarah to know that they were on the same page, even if they didn't have all the answers. Later that evening, after dinner and the usual chaos of getting the kids ready for bed, Sarah and Alex found themselves alone on the porch, the soft hum of crickets in the background as they watched the stars begin to twinkle above them. "I've been thinking about something," Sarah began, her voice soft but steady. "Something that might sound a little crazy." Alex raised an eyebrow. "Crazy is good. I'm listening." "I think we need to make a fresh start," Sarah said, turning to look at him. "Not just for the kids, but for us. We've spent so long fighting through everything, trying to fix what's broken. But maybe we need to take a leap of faith." "A leap of faith?" Alex repeated, as if trying to process the words. "What do you mean?" "Maybe we should think about starting somewhere new," she said slowly. "Somewhere where we can truly leave behind the weight of our past. Maybe a change of scenery, a new beginning." Alex was silent for a moment, his eyes on her, reading her face. "Are you serious? You want to move? I mean, that's huge, Sarah. It's not just about packing up and leaving everything behind. It's about rebuilding everything from the ground up." "I know," she whispered. "But we've already done that, haven't we? We've started over more than once. Why not one more time, but this time, for real? We need to put ourselves in a place where we can fully move forward. Where we can leave behind the memories of what happened, and build something new. A place that's just ours." The thought of moving, of uprooting their lives once again, was terrifying. Sarah knew that. But there was something about the idea that filled her with hope. It felt like the kind of bold decision that could change everything, for her, for Alex, and for the kids. Alex stared out into the distance, considering her words carefully. "It sounds scary, but maybe it's the kind of change we need. We've tried everything else, right?" "Exactly," Sarah replied. "And I'm not afraid anymore. Not of taking risks. Not of doing something crazy. I'm ready to live again, Alex. For all of us." Alex turned to look at her, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You've always been the dreamer, huh?" "I guess I am," Sarah said, her own smile returning. "But maybe this dream is worth chasing. Together." For the first time in what felt like a long time, Sarah felt like she and Alex were aligned in a way they hadn't been before. It wasn't about fixing the past, but about choosing to build a future that was full of possibility. And that future, she hoped, would be one where they could finally let go of the weight of old mistakes and start anew. The next few weeks passed in a blur of preparations. Sarah and Alex began discussing the practicalities of moving, where they might go, what they needed to do, and how to break the news to the kids. Sarah had done her research, and there were a few places that seemed promising. They weren't sure where they would end up, but the decision to leave had been made. They were ready to start fresh. The hardest part, though, was telling the kids. Olivia, with her usual optimism, was excited by the idea of a new adventure, a new home, a fresh start. But Emily was another story. When Sarah sat down with her one evening, Emily looked at her with confusion written across her face. "Wait, so you're saying we're actually leaving? Like, for real?" Sarah nodded, her heart beating a little faster as she watched her daughter process the news. "Yes, honey. We're thinking about moving to a new place. It's a chance for us to start over, together. To put everything behind us and build something new. I know it's a big change, but I think it's what we need." Emily stared at her for a long moment, her brow furrowed as she absorbed the weight of what her mother was saying. Finally, she spoke, her voice quieter than usual. "I don't know, Mom. I get that you want to start fresh. But what if we don't like it? What if it doesn't work out?" Sarah reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "I can't promise that everything will be perfect. But I can promise you that we'll make it work. Together." There was a long pause before Emily sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. "Okay. I guess it's worth trying." The relief that washed over Sarah was immense. She knew that Emily wasn't entirely convinced, but she was willing to give it a chance. And for now, that was enough. As the final days in their home crept closer, Sarah felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. This new beginning, this leap of faith, felt both exhilarating and terrifying. But she knew one thing, it was the right step for them. Whatever the future held, they were ready to face it together, as a family. And for the first time in a long while, Sarah allowed herself to truly believe that the best was yet to come. The move was official. Boxes were packed, the house was slowly emptied, and the last remnants of their old life were being loaded into a truck. Sarah felt the weight of it all pressing down on her as she glanced at the house one last time. It had been their home for years, and while it held many memories, it also held too many painful reminders of what had gone wrong. But this was a new chapter. A chapter that she was determined to write with Alex and the kids by her side. The drive to their new home took hours. The kids were restless in the back of the car, as if the excitement of change was beginning to wear thin, replaced by the uncertainty of what was ahead. Sarah glanced at Alex, who was driving with his usual stoic expression, his fingers gripping the steering wheel a little tighter than usual. "You all right?" she asked softly. Alex gave her a quick look, his lips pulling into a small smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yeah. Just nervous. It's a lot of change, you know." "I know," Sarah said, her voice tinged with understanding. "But it's also a fresh start. A chance for us to move forward. We can't let fear control us, Alex." He nodded, the lines of worry on his face slowly softening as the road stretched out before them. "You're right. We'll figure it out. Together." And that was the most important thing. Together. When they arrived at the new house, it felt like a dream. The sun was setting behind them, casting a golden glow over the new neighborhood. It was a peaceful, quiet place, the kind of place Sarah had imagined for their family, a place where they could finally begin to heal. The house itself was modest but cozy, with enough room for everyone to find their own space. There was a small yard, perfect for the kids to play in, and a deck where Sarah imagined countless sunsets spent with Alex. For a moment, Sarah stood outside the house, taking it all in. This was it. This was their fresh start. "Mom." Olivia's voice broke through her thoughts, and she turned to see her youngest running toward her with a huge grin on her face. "I love it. This is going to be awesome." Sarah smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. Olivia's excitement was infectious, and for the first time in a long time, Sarah allowed herself to fully embrace the happiness that came with this new beginning. The first few days in the new house were a whirlwind. They spent most of their time unpacking, arranging furniture, and settling in. There were challenges, of course, things weren't perfect, and the kids still had moments of frustration, but it was clear that the space, the change, had brought a sense of freedom that had been missing in their old home. Emily was quieter than usual, but Sarah could see the subtle shift in her. She wasn't resisting the change anymore, she was simply taking her time to adjust, as if she was still figuring out what this new place meant for her. That evening, after dinner, Sarah found Emily standing by the window, staring out at the unfamiliar neighborhood. Her daughter's silhouette was framed by the dimming light outside, and Sarah couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt, even though she knew moving was the right decision. "How are you feeling?" Sarah asked, approaching her daughter slowly. Emily didn't turn to face her right away. She took a deep breath before speaking. "It's weird. This whole thing. It's like, it doesn't feel real yet. Like we're just pretending." "I get that," Sarah said gently, walking over to stand next to her. "But we're not pretending, Emily. This is real. This is our new life. I know it's hard, but I promise you that we'll make it work. We'll make this place our own, together." Emily shifted her gaze to her mother, her eyes softening. "Do you really think so?" "I do," Sarah replied, her voice filled with conviction. "We've come so far, Emily. This is just another step. We don't have to have all the answers right now. We just need to keep moving forward." There was a long silence, and then Emily nodded, though there was still a trace of doubt in her eyes. "Okay. I'll try." "That's all I can ask for," Sarah said, placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "One step at a time." As the days turned into weeks, Sarah could see the changes in Emily, though they were subtle. The walls she had built around herself were slowly starting to crumble, brick by brick. Emily was starting to let go of some of her anger, her frustration with the past, and instead, was learning to embrace the present. And Sarah was doing the same. One Saturday afternoon, Sarah and Alex sat on the deck, watching the kids play in the yard. Olivia was running around, chasing the dog, while Emily sat on the steps, sketching in her notebook. There was a quiet peace in the air, something that had been missing for a long time. "I think they're adjusting," Alex said, his voice calm as he watched their children. "They are," Sarah agreed. "But I think it's us too. We're adjusting, too. This feels like home. For the first time in a long time, it feels like we're all starting over with a clean slate." Alex nodded. "It does. I still don't know if we're exactly where we need to be, but I think we're getting there. Together." Sarah smiled, leaning back in her chair. "That's all we can do. Get there, together." That night, after the kids were asleep, Sarah and Alex sat on the couch, the soft glow of a lamp casting a warm light across the living room. The house was quiet, but in that silence, they could hear the faint sound of life beginning to settle in. The house felt like it was finally becoming their own. "I'm glad we did this," Sarah said, her voice a little more vulnerable than she intended. "I'm glad we took that leap of faith." Alex reached out and took her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "Me too. It wasn't easy, but it feels right. This could be the beginning of something amazing for us." "Something better than before," Sarah said softly. "Yeah," Alex agreed, his voice filled with hope. "Better than before." They sat together in comfortable silence, their hands intertwined, and for the first time in a long while, Sarah felt that things might finally be falling into place. It wasn't perfect, but they were building something beautiful together. And that was all that mattered. The days in the new home continued to roll by, and Sarah found herself adjusting more than she had anticipated. Life was far from perfect, but the rhythm of their new routine was settling in. They had unpacked most of the boxes, and the house was beginning to feel like a home. But still, beneath the surface, there were battles, silent, unseen struggles. The weight of the past wasn't easily lifted, and the scars that had been left on their hearts didn't heal overnight. Sarah stood in the kitchen one morning, stirring her coffee absently as she watched the sun's first light filter through the kitchen window. She had always enjoyed this quiet moment to herself before the chaos of the day began. But this morning, there was a restlessness inside her that she couldn't shake. The kids were still asleep, and Alex had already left for work. This time alone should have been a gift, but it felt heavy. As if the quiet was amplifying all of the thoughts and fears she had been pushing aside. The silence was a constant reminder of how much had changed, and how much was still so fragile. She could feel it in the way Emily had been acting. The walls her daughter had built around her heart were still thick and tall. Yes, they had made progress, but it wasn't enough to make Sarah feel like everything was fixed. The cracks in their relationship were still there, just waiting to widen if they weren't tended to carefully. Sarah didn't know how to fix it. The more she tried to reach out to Emily, the more her daughter withdrew. And sometimes, that rejection hit her harder than she was willing to admit. She didn't want to push too hard, but she also didn't want to let go completely. Was this just part of the process? Or was she failing her daughter in some way? That evening, Sarah sat down with Emily, who was sitting on the couch, absently scrolling through her phone. The house was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft sounds of distant traffic outside. "Hey," Sarah started, her voice gentle but filled with concern. "Can we talk for a minute?" Emily didn't look up from her phone but gave a small, non-committal nod. Sarah hesitated, unsure of how to approach this without making Emily shut down even more. "I've noticed you've been quieter lately," she said, sitting beside her. "I know moving here has been a big change, but I want you to know that I'm here for you. I don't want you to feel like you have to carry everything on your own. We're a family now, Emily. And we need to talk. About everything." Emily finally looked at her, her gaze sharp, a mixture of hurt and frustration swirling in her eyes. "I don't know what you want me to say, Mom. I'm fine." "No, you're not," Sarah said softly. "And I know you're not, because I'm not either." Emily sighed, tossing her phone aside. "What do you want from me? I don't know how to act. I don't know how to just be fine all of a sudden. You and Dad left, and now everything's supposed to be perfect, and I'm supposed to just get over it." Sarah's heart ached at the pain in her daughter's voice. "I'm not asking you to get over it. I never thought you could. I just want us to talk. I want us to understand each other again." There was a long silence before Emily spoke again, her voice quieter now. "It's not that simple. I feel like I don't even know who I am anymore. We're in a new place, trying to start over, and everything just feels so fake. Like it's all a dream and I'm just waiting to wake up to the reality that nothing has really changed." Sarah reached for Emily's hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "I hear you. I know it's hard. Believe me, I know. But we can't let the past hold us back from building something new. I know it's not easy. And I know I've messed up before. But I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. Not this time." Emily didn't pull away, but she didn't exactly lean into the comfort either. Her gaze was distant, her mind clearly somewhere else. "I'm sorry, Mom," Emily whispered after a moment. "I know you're trying. I don't know how to fix this." "You don't have to fix it," Sarah said softly. "We'll fix it together. One day at a time." The following days were filled with small victories and quiet setbacks. Emily continued to retreat into her own world, but she also showed small signs of progress. She was talking more, just a little, but Sarah could sense the shift, however subtle. But the biggest challenge was Sarah's own internal struggle. She had promised herself she would be strong for her family, that she would carry them through this. But sometimes, the weight of it all was too much. She had her moments of doubt, her moments when the fear of failure crept in. Was this new life truly better than their old one? Was it worth all the uncertainty, all the sacrifices? One evening, as Sarah sat on the porch watching the sun dip behind the trees, Alex joined her. He had been working long hours, and she could tell that the exhaustion in his eyes matched her own. "How's she doing?" Alex asked, settling beside her. "Better," Sarah said after a long pause. "I think. But I don't know. I feel like I'm losing her. And I don't know how to get her back." Alex nodded slowly, his eyes far away. "I get it. It's hard. It's like we're stuck in a waiting game, and we're not sure when things will finally click." "I just want her to know we're here for her," Sarah whispered, the pain of those words hitting her more deeply than she expected. "That she's not alone in this. But every time I try, I feel like I'm pushing her away more." Alex wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "You're not pushing her away, Sarah. She's been through a lot. And it's going to take time. We have to trust that she'll come around. But you can't carry all of this on your own. You need to let me help too." Sarah rested her head on his shoulder, closing her eyes for a moment. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to relax, to let go of the constant tension she had been carrying. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "Scared that no matter how hard we try, we might never get it right." Alex kissed the top of her head, holding her tightly. "We'll get it right. We might not have all the answers, but we have each other. And that's all we need." Sarah's heart warmed as she sat there, wrapped in Alex's embrace. She didn't have all the answers. No one did. But for the first time in a long time, she realized that maybe that was okay. Healing took time. Progress wasn't linear. And in that moment, Sarah found the strength to keep going, one step at a time. The past didn't define them. The future was still unwritten. And together, they would write it. The morning light seeped through the curtains, casting a soft glow on the freshly painted walls of their new home. It was the kind of day that could be full of promise, a fresh start for everyone. But Sarah felt a growing unease. There was a shadow lingering in her heart, a concern she couldn't shake. She stood by the window, staring out at the neighborhood that was beginning to feel familiar yet still distant. It was as if the house and the life they were building were real in some ways, but unreal in others. The kids were adjusting, Alex seemed determined to make it work, but there was something Sarah couldn't ignore, the lingering weight of the past. Alex had left for work early again, and Sarah had spent the morning with the kids. They were finally settled into their new routines, but she could tell that something was still off, particularly with Emily. She had been quieter than usual, her expressions more distant, her interactions more strained. It wasn't just the move. It was something deeper. Sarah had spent weeks trying to break through Emily's walls, but each attempt felt like it pushed them farther apart. Emily had become more withdrawn, her anger simmering beneath the surface. And Sarah wasn't sure how much longer she could keep trying before it all came crashing down. That afternoon, Sarah decided to check in with her again. She found Emily sitting alone in her room, headphones in, eyes fixed on her phone. The world outside seemed so quiet in comparison to the emotional noise Sarah was feeling inside. "Can we talk?" Sarah asked softly, standing in the doorway. Emily didn't answer right away. She just pulled her headphones off, her eyes avoiding Sarah's. "About what?" she mumbled, clearly not in the mood for another heart-to-heart. Sarah stepped into the room, taking a deep breath. "About you. About us. I know things have been hard lately. And I know I've been pushing you. But I just want to make sure we're okay." Emily let out a frustrated sigh, leaning back on her bed. "You really don't get it, do you? Everything's changed, Mom. I'm just trying to figure out where I fit in this mess. You and Dad, you want everything to be fine, like nothing ever happened. But things don't just fix themselves. I don't expect everything to be perfect, Sarah replied, sitting on the edge of the bed. But I do expect us to be honest with each other. I want you to talk to me, Emily. I want you to let me in. Emily finally met her mother's gaze, her eyes clouded with hurt. I don't know how. I don't even know what to say. I feel like I'm drowning in all this change. And it's not just the move, it's everything. It's the fact that you and Dad were barely there when I needed you, and now you're acting like we can just start over. Like everything's supposed to be fine, and I'm supposed to be fine. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes, but she held them back, not wanting to upset Emily even more. I'm sorry, Emily. I know I messed up. I know I wasn't there when you needed me most, but I'm here now. I don't want to be that person who lets you down again. I'm tired of pretending, Mom, Emily whispered, the raw emotion in her voice unmistakable. I'm tired of pretending everything is okay when it's not. I'm not okay. And I don't think I ever will be. Sarah's heart broke at her daughter's words. She reached out, touching Emily's arm gently. I know you're hurting, sweetie. I know you're angry. But I need you to understand that we're trying. We're trying to make it right, Emily. I know it's hard, but I believe in us. I believe in you. Emily shook her head, tears finally spilling from her eyes. I don't know if I can believe in anything anymore. Sarah left Emily's room with a heavy heart. She had no answers, no quick fixes to offer. All she had was the raw truth of the situation. Things were broken, and healing wasn't easy. Not for her, not for Emily, not for anyone. But as she walked back to the kitchen, Sarah realized that maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something. The beginning of honest conversations. Of breaking down walls. Of acknowledging the pain instead of pretending it didn't exist. The days passed, and Emily remained distant, but Sarah noticed small changes. Emily's expression softened a little when they spoke. She participated more in family activities, even if it was just in a small way. But the real change came when Emily started spending time outside, sitting on the porch or walking around the neighborhood, exploring the area on her own terms. It wasn't much, but it was something. One evening, after dinner, Sarah found Emily sitting on the porch steps. The air was cool, the sky painted in shades of purple and orange as the sun set. Sarah walked outside, quietly sitting next to her. Mind if I join you? Sarah asked, her voice gentle. Emily shrugged, not saying anything, but there was no rejection in her body language either. Sarah took that as a good sign. Do you miss it? Emily asked after a long silence, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Miss what? Sarah replied. Miss the old house. Our old life. Sarah paused, the question catching her off guard. She hadn't expected Emily to bring up the past so directly. Sometimes, she said, her voice quiet. I think about it, yeah. But then I remind myself that we're not just starting over. We're moving forward. Emily nodded slowly, her voice softer now. I don't know if I can move forward. I don't know if I can just forget everything that happened. You don't have to forget, Sarah said, reaching for her daughter's hand. But we have to keep going. We have to keep trying. Together. Emily was silent for a long time. And just when Sarah thought the conversation had ended, Emily spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't want to lose you, Mom. Sarah's heart clenched at the admission. She pulled Emily into a hug, holding her tightly. You won't lose me. I promise. And in that moment, Sarah realized that this was the first real step toward healing. Not perfection, not an immediate fix, but the willingness to be honest, vulnerable, and to keep going, one step at a time. The air had begun to cool, and the scent of autumn lingered in the air. The leaves outside were turning shades of gold and red, signaling the end of one season and the beginning of another. For Sarah, it was hard not to see the metaphor in that. Their lives had been in a constant state of transition for months, and yet, she couldn't help but feel that something was shifting, something subtle, but real. It was early one Saturday morning when Sarah received a message from Emily, asking if they could talk. At first, Sarah wasn't sure if it was a good sign or just another plea for space. But something in her gut told her it was worth pursuing. She knew they were at a crossroads, and this moment could make all the difference. Sarah knocked gently on Emily's bedroom door before entering. Emily was sitting at her desk, her back to the door. Her posture was rigid, as if she were bracing for something. When Sarah walked in, Emily didn't immediately turn around, but she didn't seem as closed off as she had before. "You wanted to talk?" Sarah asked, her voice soft, careful not to break the fragile silence between them. Emily finally turned in her chair, her face serious but not as guarded as usual. I don't know where to start," she admitted. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, facing Emily. "Start wherever you feel comfortable." Emily was quiet for a moment, fidgeting with the sleeve of her sweater. Then, in a hesitant voice, she began. "I've been thinking a lot. About everything that's happened, about all the things we've been through, and I realized something." Sarah held her breath, afraid to interrupt, afraid of pushing too hard. She had learned that sometimes silence allowed Emily the space she needed to process her feelings. "I realized I've been angry," Emily continued. "Angry at you and Dad, angry at myself. I was angry because I felt like I didn't have control over anything. My world was falling apart, and I didn't know how to fix it. I was just stuck in this place where I didn't know how to move forward." Sarah's heart ached, but she remained silent, letting Emily speak. "And I think part of me was just waiting for things to magically get better," Emily said, her voice cracking a little. "But I don't think things work like that. And I don't want to keep waiting for a perfect moment to just feel okay. I think I've been afraid of facing it all, facing how much I was hurt." Sarah swallowed the lump in her throat. She felt a tear slip down her cheek, but she wiped it away quickly, not wanting to disrupt the moment. "I understand, sweetheart. I do. And I'm so sorry for the pain you felt. I wish I could take it away. But all I can do is be here, now, and be with you through it." Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "I don't know how to trust again. I don't know if I can just let go of all the hurt. But I don't want to keep carrying it either." Sarah leaned forward, her heart breaking for her daughter's struggle. "It's okay to not have all the answers. It's okay to not know how to move forward. But what matters is that you don't have to do it alone, Emily. We can take it one day at a time. I'm not going anywhere." There was a long silence, but this time it wasn't filled with tension. It was a quiet kind of peace, a shared understanding that they were in this together. Emily, for the first time in a long while, seemed to let her guard down. "Do you think we can fix this?" Emily asked softly, the vulnerability in her voice making Sarah's heart swell. "I don't know if we can fix everything," Sarah said, her voice filled with tenderness. "But I believe we can heal. And healing doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. But as long as we're willing to work on it together, I think we can find our way." Emily nodded slowly, still unsure but willing to believe in the possibility. "I'm willing to try." That night, as Sarah lay in bed, she reflected on the conversation with Emily. The fear that had weighed so heavily on her heart had been replaced with a sense of cautious hope. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that things could get better, that her relationship with her daughter could heal. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen all at once, but maybe, just maybe, they were finally starting to find their way back to each other. The weeks that followed weren't without their challenges. There were still moments of tension, and there were still times when Emily retreated into herself. But Sarah noticed the small steps forward, the little glimmers of progress. Emily started spending more time with the younger kids, laughing with them, teasing them in that way only an older sibling could. The walls she had built around herself weren't as high as they once were, and Sarah could see the cracks beginning to form. The family began to feel more like a unit. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic transformations. But the quiet moments, the small conversations, the shared meals, the laughter, those moments were the foundation of something new. Something real. One afternoon, as Sarah was getting dinner ready, she heard a knock on the door. When she opened it, she was surprised to see Alex standing there, holding a bouquet of flowers in his hands. His eyes were tired, but there was a softness to his expression, a gentle kind of warmth that Sarah hadn't seen in a while. "Hi," he said with a small smile, his voice carrying a note of playfulness. "I thought you might need a little pick-me-up." Sarah smiled, her heart fluttering a little at the gesture. "You're always full of surprises," she teased, stepping aside to let him in. "Yeah, well, it's not every day I get to surprise my beautiful wife," Alex replied, handing her the flowers. Sarah couldn't help but laugh, feeling a rush of love for him. "Thank you. These are beautiful." As Alex set the flowers on the counter, he paused and looked at Sarah. "How's everything going? With the kids, with Emily?" Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the question, but also the relief of being able to share her feelings with Alex. "It's slow. But I think we're making progress. Emily and I had a real conversation today. A real one. I think she's starting to trust me again." Alex's eyes softened, and he reached for Sarah's hand, squeezing it gently. "I'm proud of you. Both of you. I know it's not easy, but you're doing the best you can. And that's enough." Sarah felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She had spent so many years trying to make everything perfect, but maybe the real beauty of their journey was in the imperfections. It was in the messy, painful moments where they learned and grew together. "You're right," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "It's enough." And for the first time in a long while, Sarah felt like they were on the verge of something new, a new chapter, a new beginning. It wouldn't be without its challenges, but they had the strength to face them together. The crisp autumn air had finally given way to the chill of early winter. The holiday season was quickly approaching, a time that Sarah had once dreaded, but now it felt different. This year, there was a quiet sense of optimism, a sense that they were on the verge of something better. But that didn't mean everything was perfect. Far from it. The work was still ongoing, the healing was still in progress, but for the first time in years, Sarah could see the possibility of a future where everything didn't feel so heavy. It was a few days before Christmas, and Sarah stood in the living room, adjusting the lights on the tree. The house had been decorated simply but warmly, garlands draped over the mantel, stockings hung with care, and the soft glow of candles flickering from every corner. It wasn't much, but it felt like home. It felt like they had finally started to rebuild the foundation of what they had once lost. The kids were bustling around, preparing for their holiday traditions, baking cookies, making homemade cards, and planning what they'd give each other for Christmas. Alex had taken the day off work, and they were all together, the air filled with a hum of excitement that was infectious. Yet, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was just around the corner, a final test of everything they had been through. Later that evening, Sarah found herself sitting with Alex on the porch, a blanket draped over their shoulders. The air was cold, but the warmth of being together kept the chill at bay. The conversation had been light, talking about the kids, about their plans for the holidays, but beneath it all, Sarah could sense that Alex was holding something back. "What's on your mind?" she asked, breaking the silence between them. Alex exhaled slowly, looking out into the yard. "I've been thinking about what Emily said the other day," he said, his voice thoughtful. "About not knowing how to trust again. It hit me harder than I thought it would." Sarah's heart tightened at the mention of Emily. She had known that this was the part of the healing process that would take the most time. Emily's anger and hurt were still raw, and every time they took a step forward, it seemed as though they were on the verge of 2 steps back. "I know," Sarah replied softly. "I've been thinking about it, too. She's still struggling, and I think she feels like she has to carry the weight of everything by herself. But we can't fix it all at once. I think she needs to see us trying, even if it's messy. Alex turned to her, his expression serious. I know, but I can't help but feel like we're running out of time. What if she's not able to let go of the past? What if we lose her again? The fear in his voice resonated with Sarah. She had been grappling with that same fear for months. What if everything they were working toward fell apart? What if their family couldn't fully heal from the scars of the past? We won't lose her, Sarah said firmly, though her voice wavered slightly. We've come too far. And we've shown her that we're here, no matter what. But we can't do it alone. We need to keep showing up for her. Keep being patient. Alex nodded slowly, his hand finding Sarah's in the quiet darkness. I just want her to know that we're not going anywhere. I don't want her to feel like she's still alone in this. I don't think she does anymore, Sarah said softly, her eyes glistening with emotion. Not completely. But it's going to take time. And it's going to take all of us, together. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the weight of their conversation hanging in the air. It was a reminder that, even though they had made so much progress, there were still moments of doubt, moments where they feared they might lose the things that mattered most. The next few days were filled with the usual holiday hustle, the kids eagerly opening presents on Christmas morning, laughter echoing through the house as they played with new toys, and everyone gathering around the table for a meal that felt more like a celebration than just another family dinner. But despite the joy and warmth, Sarah couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in the back of her mind. Emily had been distant again, retreating into her room more than she had in recent weeks. It was a sign, one that Sarah couldn't afford to ignore. On Christmas evening, after everyone had gathered around the fire for one last moment of family togetherness, Sarah knew it was time to have another conversation with Emily. There was no perfect way to do it, no magic words that would make everything better, but she had to try. She found Emily in her room, sitting on her bed with her journal open in front of her. The soft glow of the lamp illuminated her face, but she didn't look up when Sarah entered. Hey, Sarah said gently, standing in the doorway. Do you have a minute? Emily hesitated, but then nodded. Yeah. What's up? Sarah walked in, sitting down beside her. I just wanted to check in. How are you doing? Emily shrugged, her eyes not meeting Sarah's. I don't know. I guess I'm fine. Just, trying to figure things out. I get that, Sarah said quietly. But you don't have to do it alone. We're all here, Em. I'm here. And if you need to talk, even if it's hard, I want you to know I'm not going anywhere. Emily stayed silent for a moment, then sighed. I don't want to feel like this anymore, Mom. I don't want to keep being angry, but I don't know how to stop. Sarah's heart ached, and she placed a hand on Emily's. You don't have to fix it all today. But I need you to know that I'm here. I'll be here for whatever you need. Even if it takes time. I'm not going anywhere. Emily finally looked up, her eyes full of uncertainty. You mean it? Of course, Sarah replied, her voice steady. We're a family, Emily. And no matter what happens, we're in this together. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emily smiled. It wasn't a huge smile, but it was real. And in that moment, Sarah knew they were taking another step forward. The following weeks weren't without their challenges. There were still moments of tension, misunderstandings, and painful conversations. But as they navigated these ups and downs, they did it as a family, united in their commitment to heal, to move forward, and to rebuild what they had lost. And although the future was still uncertain, Sarah knew one thing for sure, she would fight for her family, no matter what. The path to healing was long, but it was no longer a solitary journey. It was a shared journey. Together, they would face whatever came their way. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?